Leeds, it's between 9.50 and 12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10p, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60p. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Very much appreciate you joining me. Lots to talk about today. I'm with you all the way until 1 o'clock this afternoon. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker or watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is fabulous to have your company. Also delighted to have the company of Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Very, very good morning to you as well. We have an awful lot to talk about, as always, and I'd love to get your input on a number of the topics we're talking about. Now, again, I know the tariffs still in the news. Yes, there's a lot on the tariffs, talk about them a lot, and I realise that, but they are very, very, very much big news, I'm afraid. They still are very big news. We are looking at a massive, massive world trade war at this point, with Donald Trump insisting there will be no pause in US tariffs. Some rumours about that yesterday, which were debunked by him in the evening. He demanded that China backs down in the trade war. They've imposed equal tariffs on China, back on the United States, that 34% tariff on all goods, on top of all the other tariffs, steel tariffs, and the others are about 20%. They're coming in tomorrow on Wednesday. Donald Trump says if those tariffs do go ahead, he says they're reciprocal tariffs, but his were reciprocal tariffs, so who knows who's telling the truth there. If they do go ahead with that, the US is going to slap China with another 50% tariff. We are looking at total tariffs on some Chinese imports of over 100% at that point. That will be, in lots of cases, they break down a trade, which is maybe what Donald Trump is looking for. It's going to have a big impact, though, not just on consumers in the US, but on you and me. I know people think this is something that's happening over there. It's happening to us in real time right now. Anyway, the US president also urged Americans not to panic. He even branded critics with his own Republican Party as panicans, despite, of course, trillions of dollars being wiped from global markets by his tariff announcement. Also going to be talking about things slightly closer to home, but the French officials who've been blasted for spending British taxpayers' cash. Bearing in mind, we give them roughly £500 million every year, £2 billion over the last 4 years to basically try and stop those small boat crossings. They've been blasted as pathetic after they put up 2 road barriers, and we'll show you a picture of them in a few moments. They put up 2 road barriers that are supposed to stop people smugglers from taking dinghies to beaches. They're open all day, only closed at night. I think you can see it if you're watching on YouTube. You'll be able to see it right now. And it's flat ground with no fence around it. You can literally drive around the fence. It's an absolute joke. This is a joke, and it will probably have cost tens and tens of thousands of your and my money to put this barrier there. Meanwhile, in a bid to try and stop illegal migrants coming to this country, more than 40 Labour MPs have emulated old Tony Blair, Saint Blair. They call for the introduction of digital ID cards. They say that will tackle illegal migrants working illegally in this country. But of course it won't, because you can always check for someone's passport and know whether someone's illegally allowed to work or not already. And if an employer doesn't do that, he's probably not bothered whether they've got a digital ID card either, is he? Anyway, I just do not understand why so many people are absolutely obsessed with whatever the issue is. I mean, literally whatever the problem is. Oh, people littering. If we had digital ID cards, they say, oh, people smuggling. If we had digital ID cards, whatever it is, they blame it on not having digital ID cards. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Plus, Prince Harry has arrived today at the Court of Appeal for a hearing about his security arrangements that's starting today. The Duke of Sussex is appealing a ruling that dismissed his challenge to the level of police protection he receives in the UK. This is basically a case he's bringing against His Majesty's government, i.e. his dad's government. His dad, meanwhile, is in Italy. It's funny how he only came to the country just as his dad was leaving. Tells you something about that state of relations, does it not? Anyway, I want to talk about all of that. Want to hear your thoughts on all of that as well. Tom Slater is also with us to chat about it all. I particularly want to hear from you, by the way, about this road barrier. We'll give you the number in just a couple of moments. But let's talk US-China tariff war first. I mean, it's not getting any calmer. I can absolutely see the point of America and Donald Trump saying, right, look, there's tariffs on us. What? EU, you've got tariffs on us where we don't have tariffs on you. That's not fair. We're going to equalise our tariffs. I've got no problem with that. Seems perfectly reasonable. I think the EU has far too many high tariffs. They're protecting their, inefficient French farmers. That's their choice. But there is a penalty to be paid for doing that in terms of your free trade with the biggest economy in the world. I can understand the reason to have tariffs on China when China is basically, the Chinese government completely subsidising state subsidy of cheap goods to flood markets to basically ruin, the steel production and every other production basically in the Western world. There are arguments for this. What Donald Trump has done with these worldwide tariffs across the board and this ramping up of the rhetoric, frankly, is terrifying the living daylights out of me, not just financially. And I did mention this last week as well. I am really worried, especially with China. We've got two hostile nation states. I am really worried that this could escalate into something more, that it doesn't just mean a war over the economy, but it could mean a military war. Where are you on this?
I mean, that's always the danger, isn't it? That becomes the sort of prelude to something that is not just a trade war, but some sort of other broader form of conflict. We're obviously not there yet. And I think it's also pretty clear that whilst you could break up what Trump is saying and what he's doing, and it might be coherent on its own terms, you want to rebuild the American industrial base. That's something that many people have been interested in. Even Joe Biden was quite interested in trying to do that. You might also want to try and contain the rise of China in relation to America. That again is something that, agree or disagree, is a coherent position to hold. At the same time, you could also say, is this a negotiating tactic? Is he just browbeating the world because he wants to sign more preferential trade agreements?
Sort of like, let me get your
countries?
Attention and let's get going with this.
Absolutely. But the thing is, all of these things kind of conflict.
This is the thing.
Not least because of the fact that in whacking these tariffs on many other countries, even other Asian countries which are very closely aligned to the US place.
Or Australia, who has a free trade deal.
Absolutely.
Tariffs on a country that has zero tariffs on your goods.
So you're kind of not necessarily bringing your allies in as you're trying to make this broader geopolitical moves. At the same time, also, if you are primarily interested in kind of boosting the lot of the American worker, boosting manufacturing and so on, even the people in Trump's orbit who always argued for that said, you have to do this, but it needs to be a stable policy. It needs to be clearly articulated.
Yeah, this is it for 4 years.
Term.
It's not going to change.
Whereas these tariffs have been going up and down like a yo-yo for the past couple of weeks. Like when it started.
Pause, not pause.
Exactly. So on all of these different terms, it just doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. And people are feeling the consequences.
Caller on the show yesterday saying, look, we can benefit. I mean, certainly we've got benefit. We're not in the EU. I mean, because of German exports in particular, German-French exports, the whole of the EU has been slapped with that 20% tariff. We've got a 10% tariff, so we benefit from there. They say, well, look, maybe some companies, particularly, Southern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, might move to or Northern Ireland, or they'll move from France, they'll move to the UK, and then we had experts later on pointing out, well, wouldn't it just be easier for them to avoid tariffs altogether? If you're going to move from there to there, you may as well move all the way to the States. But the point is, you wouldn't bother doing that and having those extra costs necessarily of moving and all the costs of the new plant and all that, unless you were sure that those tariffs were going to stay. Not even just for the next 4 years, but for longer than that. And as you say, that's where, is it temporary, isn't it temporary? But also, if it's a negotiating position, if it is the negotiating position, then that doesn't tell you as a business owner you should go and relocate to the States. The tariffs would have to be really, really darn high in a country to make it worth your while to move your plant all the way, or your jobs all the way to America, where much higher costs than in many, certainly Asian countries there would be, maybe not in Europe, but Asian countries. It just doesn't tally. And you're not going to raise billions from those tariffs, which is what he says is going to help pay off the multi-trillion dollar debt the country has. You're not going to raise that money if you then do deals for free trade tariffs or people move their businesses to America and therefore they're not paying the tariffs. It can't. There are like sort of three different aims and they're all mutually exclusive. So we don't know where. I don't know whether he knows, but there has certainly been a bit of Republican backlash. And again, I'm not someone who criticises anything he does or says because it's Donald Trump. I think there is a method in bringing back industry to America. We need to bring it back here. And there's an argument for tariffs. For instance, we protect British agriculture. Protecting British steel. There are very strong arguments for certain limited tariffs to protect certain vital industries, and I think all countries understand that. But this is just off the scale. And again, my big worry is that things escalate. Even the bad feeling between the EU and the US over Ukraine and over this. And I know Keir Starmer's playing nicey-nicey, and I think that's the right tactic at the current time. Dividing the West is exactly what Russia and China want to do. And when Donald Trump makes that decision himself, and I'm with him, I think Europe has been freeloading on American taxpayers for decades when it comes to defence, and I completely agree with him on that. And they should have stepped up a long time ago. I've been saying it for years, but divided West when we have enemies like Iran. Like Russia and like China, I think is really dangerous.
And it's just shot through, I think, with a lot of hypocrisy on the other side, though. We've already touched on the questions of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, standing up and trying to appear as a representative of wonderful global free trade. The whole point of the European Union is that it's a protectionist bloc. It has a common external tariff. It is also all of these non-tariff barriers which are introduced by all of its kind of Byzantine regulations. So I think in his own way, in his own kind of blundering way, Trump was often, he kind of casts a light on a lot of the hypocrisies and the cant that exists in world affairs a lot of the time. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, genuinely, I'm absolutely fascinated by the number of Ramonas who will not accept that we've had a Brexit dividend from this. Oh, yeah, we've lost a load of EU trade. Well, that was up to them. I mean, if they don't want to trade with us, I mean, we can't force people to buy our stuff if they don't want to trade with us. That's up to them. They put the regulations in. If they want to stop their consumers from buying our stuff and making it more expensive, that's up to them. I mean, one thing I definitely don't want, I saw a poll today suggesting more than 50% of British people want Starmer to retaliate with tariffs on US goods. What? So you want to pay higher prices?
No, it's
mad. It's mad.
It's one of those things where, obviously, in certain areas, it might make sense to kind of raise the tariff. But again, it's that sort of thing where if it just becomes a kind of tit for tat, that's a race to the bottom.
We're just all paying more. We've already got inflation going up. I don't think that's a good idea. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. What I really want to hear from you today, though, well, there were two topics really, both related to immigration, and this blows my mind. French officials have spent, I'm going to guess, tens of thousands of pounds, because a road hump basically costs about 10 grand. I don't know how people manage to spend 10 grand on a bit of tarmac, but they do, going to local councils. But they've spent, I believe, it's probably tens of thousands of pounds on 2 road barriers near Calais, which are described as pathetic. And I think rightly, and if you are listening to us and you've not watched us on YouTube, do have a look. If you look on my Twitter feed, you've got the YouTube link. Have a look, because you need to see this barrier. You need to see it in full glory. This is an absolute French farce. It's in the Sun newspaper today. Basically, the idea is to stop small boat crossings. They want to stop the people smugglers from carrying the big dinghies in. These big dinghies that carry, well, they're not supposed to carry 50 people, but they do, and the engines and the life jackets, and basically, getting a van in with everything in it. And the idea is, well, we'll put this barrier. Now, it's just like a barrier. It's not even like a big gate. It's just one big, a lever barrier that just goes up and goes down. And they've got 2 of them. And the idea is that is going to stop people smugglers. It's been paid for out of the money you and I give as taxpayers, £476 million a year, £2 billion in the last 4 years. It's been paid for out of that budget to stop the people smugglers. I kid you not, that barrier is open all day. It's only closed at night. I wonder if the people smugglers have watches or can look at the sky and tell the sodding time or not. But I reckon we'll go to the barrier when it's open, not closed. And B, this is beyond belief. Genuinely, this is a flat bit of road next to flat green fields. There is no fence. They can simply drive around the gate. They could drive. I have a funny feeling. Now, I may be wrong. It may be the case that people who are taking thousands of pounds from people who have travelled around the world with, and they're taking them to pay people, them as people smugglers, to smuggle people across the channel, putting those people's lives at risk and breaking the law. It may be that those people feel very strongly about road laws. It may be they feel very strongly that one should not off-road and drive around a barrier, and they would never ever break that rule. It may be, but I think it's unlikely. This is such a farce. This is such a joke. This is one of those days, and I'm trying not to swear because this is insane, and we've helped pay for this. The French are taking what I believe is known as le mic out of us. Le mic. Should we stop giving France £476 million a year of our own money to, quote, stop the boats? When they ain't stopping the boats, we've got more people coming than ever before. They can clearly afford to do it. It's not like there's some third world country that needs our financial help. They're a rich country. They can afford to do this themselves. It's in their interest to do this themselves. They wouldn't have thousands of migrants sitting in northern France waiting to go to Calais if they stopped this, or they accepted people back and so there was no point doing it. Should we just stop giving them our money? Because they're just taking, as I say, le mic out of us, and it's an absolute farce. Tom Slater, we just end the money now and just say, right, we're just going to return people, end of.
Well, it might well work. I mean, if you think...
They might feel strongly about this.
If you think you're a man, you've smuggled your way out of Afghanistan, you've gone across Europe hanging onto the bottom of a lorry, you get into France, you drive up to that barrier, you think, closed. Come back tomorrow.
Gutted.
But this has been going on for a very long time, hasn't it? I mean, this is just the most absurd example of it, but the nature of this deal with France has always been ridiculous on the basis that you can throw as much money at them as you want. They have very little incentive to actually follow through on this, partly because of for the simple fact that when people leave France and go to Britain, they're no longer their issue to deal with.
But a lot of them wouldn't be travelling across France to northern France, to Calais, to sit in, and it's really difficult for the local people there, just around about tens of, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of migrants sitting there living in makeshift tents, and and again, we've got a crime issue there as well, as we've seen in Britain when we have this. That they wouldn't be there if they weren't trying to get to Britain. If they knew Britain wasn't a soft touch, they knew they'd be returned, they wouldn't be there.
No, exactly, and I think in a way we can frame this as why are the French taking le mic, as you very colourfully put it, or is this also why have we continued to kind of outsource this to the point where it just obviously doesn't work? Like, clearly the issue is that the pull factor is still very much there. There is a very clear sense that even if you enter illegally, even if you have absolutely no right to claim asylum, even if all of these things are true, it's very unlikely you'll be it's very likely rather that you'll be allowed to stay. That is surely a much bigger factor than whether or not they've built more fences on the side.
Well, it's not the fences, it's just the gate. I mean, it's just like there's a meme, isn't there, of sort of, a green field that's just got a gate with a sign saying, please shut the gate. You could literally just walk around it. I would love to hear from you after this. Should we stop giving France this money? Because they're not stopping the boats. They're absolutely taking the mick out of us. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. Before we move on, though, I want to add that there is another solution. Can anyone guess what the solution to all of our problems is? And it doesn't really matter what the problem is. Tony Blair, that's the hint I'll give you. What is the solution to this problem, illegal migrants coming to this country? Or, anything else at all? All together now. Digital ID cards. Yep. Of course it is. That's the solution. More than 40 Labour MPs. This is the Labour Growth Group, the Red Wall Group and the Blue Labour Group. Basically, a load of MPs who know they've got no chance of keeping their seats in the next election unless they actually tackle the illegal migration and the mass legal migration issue. They've called for the introduction of digital ID. They say, so the government can get a grip on illegal migration and make it easier for people to access public services. Do you have difficulty accessing public services? I don't think having digital ID, I can identify myself with many documents. Now, people will say, and I hear this so many times, you already carry ID, you've got your credit card, you've got, your phone, you're being tracked constantly anyway, you've got your passport, your driving licence if you drive or you ever travel abroad. So what difference is it? Now, Tony Blair has literally put up digital ID for every possible. I mean, my guinea pig's died. If you'd had digital ID, you wouldn't. He's properly lost his mind on this. But this is an open letter to the Prime Minister from these MPs. They say it could help target off-the-books employment, the black market economy, allowing people to seamlessly engage with the NHS and other public services. And this was suggested for tackling the issue of foreigners using the NHS only on yesterday's show. But here's the thing. When I had to employ, a nanny when I went back to work, it's not a posh thing. Shared it with someone else. It was cheaper than putting my kid in nursery. Employed a nanny, wonderful girl. I found out. She was references amazing. And I said, okay, I'm going to need a copy of your of your passport and things. Obviously, I need to know that you're legally allowed to work. You're a member, from an EU country at the time. And she said, well, she wasn't. So she wasn't legally entitled to work. And I said, well, I can't employ you then. Every employer can easily ask. If someone is not British, you simply ask for their passport, and they have to have a passport. They legally have to. If they haven't got a passport, they can produce that shows you that they're legally allowed to work here and a visa. Then they're not allowed to work here. There's nothing stopping employers doing that at the moment. What we need to do is find the hell out of employers who employ people illegally. I mean, you employ people illegally. I'm thinking it should be prison time. I think if you write a post on Facebook that people don't like and you get prison time, I'm thinking illegally employing someone who's no right to be here and encouraging smuggling gangs. I'm thinking imprisonable offence for me, or a fine. We're talking 50 grand. We'll take your house levels of fine to stop people. No one's going to risk doing it. If you employ someone and you haven't asked for their ID, you can't go, oh, I didn't know they weren't legal. Well, yeah, you did, because you didn't prove that they were legal. We can solve this. We don't need to have digital ID for every British person, do we?
No, absolutely not. I mean, this, as you say, is the sort of Blairite answer to absolutely everything. In the same way there's a certain type of Conservative for whom national service is the answer to everything. For Blairites, it's digital ID. Yeah, put them together. Absolutely perfect.
We can have people in national services making the national ID cards.
Yep, exactly. All pulling together. That'll bring us together as a nation. But it's one of those things where it's a pre-existing agenda, an axe to grind. These people don't really care about civil liberties. They quite like the idea of it being quite easy to track people. We saw some of that being sort of played with during the pandemic, of course, and vaccine passports and all the rest of it. So that's where they're coming from with it. In terms of the issue itself, the best you could say is that this is an admission of failure, that because you failed to control the borders, because you failed to enforce employment legislation, because you failed, therefore everyone else needs to have their civil liberties and privacy encroached upon.
And it's always the answer, and it'll keep us safe.
If you're concerned about migration, protect your own borders, make that a meaningful thing.
But also enforce the law we've already got. Exactly, we never do.
That's what it comes down to.
Enforce the laws, have more checks on people. I mean, just make it a requirement. You want to employ someone, and again, if they're employing them in the black market, if they're already not paying tax, already breaking the law, punish them for that. I really do not understand why on earth that would be complicated to do. That's just having the resources to do it. And if once people know that will happen, they will not take the risk. It is really that simple. If the penalty is that great, they won't take the risk. But again, I've always been opposed to digital ID, but nothing convinced me more that I want to be opposed to it, and I'm right to be. What happened during the pandemic and the attempts to try and control us, and also what happened when we saw with in Canada with Justin Trudeau, and I don't think they had digital ID there developed that way, although most European countries do, but that they would. Their ability to control people and what they could, where they could go, what they could do, ability to go to work and controlling their bank accounts. I think we're already at risk of having that sort of control on our civil liberties. But also the idea, India, Pakistan, those wonderful bastions of freedom and law abiding. Virtually every European country apart from Denmark and Ireland has digital ID. So France and Italy and Germany and Sweden, which have completely out of control illegal migration. So they've got digital ID, but apparently digital ID is the answer to solve that problem.
It just doesn't make any sense. But I think that's because at best you could say this is part of why they're pushing for this. But as you say, it's their solution to absolutely every social problem that crops up.
Tony Blair,
they just quite like the idea of everyone
Tony Blair's institute works with one of the organisations that would basically make a load of money from doing this. I know it's a complete coincidence. In no way is Tony Blair out for himself on this. Of course not. No one would ever make that suggestion. He's doing it for our good.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear your thoughts on both these stories. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. You can get in touch at Talk TV, all the other ways. Love to hear from you. We're going to take a quick break right now. Up next, we'll get to your messages. This is Talk.
sheer number of petty criminals, thieves, mobile phone thefts, all that sort of thing, the sheer number of people who commit crimes almost every day and simply don't get sentences of this long. Real bread and butter stuff, the stuff that you learn when you're in primary school or when you're a toddler. You don't take things that don't belong to you. You don't break things that don't belong to you. You don't attack people for no good reason, often not even for a good reason. Those people are the ones that are not going to prison at all. But as you say, somebody who sent a tweet, well, an example must be made of that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:28 is the time. By the way, we've got lots of top guests coming up. Brenton O'Neill is coming up. We're also going to be talking to the former head of Royal Protection, Dara Davies, about Prince Harry back in court again. I mean, it's the appeal of an appeal of an appeal. Basically saying he doesn't get enough security when he comes to this country, though he keeps coming to this country and seems to somehow survive. But there we are. I'm actually more with him on this than I'm on pretty much anything else. But there we are. We'll come to that in a few moments. First up, let's get to your messages coming in thick and fast about, you can get in touch about tariffs. You can always get in touch about any topic we're talking about. But these French officials spending taxpayers' cash that you and I have provided to the French on two pathetic, they've been called pathetic. Pathetic doesn't do justice. These road barriers supposedly stop small boat migrants, but they're open all day. They can easily be driven around. They're an absolute joke. Should we stop giving France money? And why on earth do more than 40 Labour MPs today think that digital ID cards is the answer to illegal migration? These people are breaking my soul. Let's go to text messages. Patrick says this isn't going to stop. We'll still be talking about it in 4 years' time. 440, mate. Unlike France, Britain doesn't have a tradition of overthrowing the government. They just complain and do nothing. This is true. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Maybe we need to become a little bit more revolutionary.
I always like the idea of that. I mean, especially standing up.
You're an old lefty at heart, aren't
Exactly.
you? Yeah.
You know, we should. It's one of those things where, particularly during the pandemic, I'm sure many people felt this way. It was like it would have been nice to see a bit more sustained response to that kind of crackdown on our civil liberties.
Can I just say,
finding out would be.
I'm loving this message from Joy. We should be charging France £250,000 for each and every illegal economic migrant who reaches our shores. I don't know how we get the money, but I like the sound of that, Joy. Let's look into that. Someone who's a lawyer, look into it, get back to us. Paul says they're not stopping the boats. It looks like a dereliction of duty, a criminal offence. People are drowning in the channel because of both governments' inability to put an end to this. I've got to be honest with you, I mean, I find myself remarkably unbothered by adults who put themselves on these boats, which are clearly unsafe. I wouldn't dream of doing it and them losing their lives. It's sad that they do, but my God, if you're choosing to do such a stupid thing when you're in a perfectly safe country, I've got very little sympathy. The kids, when they put the kids on, I want their parents prosecuted. Simple as that. You and I would be prosecuted if we put our kid in harm's way like that. I don't know why they shouldn't be. Mark says, is the UK literally a hotel now? Yes, is the answer to that. Let's go to Claire, who is in the Wirral. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. Are they taking Le Mic?
Sorry, what was that?
I said, are they taking Le Mic?
Oh, definitely taking Le Mic, and they're putting two fingers up. And I mean, they're taking the Le Mic. They have been to us over on this side of the channel as well, haven't they?
Yeah.
You know, but I just think it's just ridiculous. I mean, we've got the RNLI on our side of the channel. Who's commissioning them? I would love to know. I mean, we've got these hotels that the government are paying for. Are they paying for the RNLI? Because I'm sure a lot of people have stopped their donations now.
I think that has been an issue, hasn't it? I do think they get some state funding, don't they? But also it's public donations, and it's an amazing charity doing amazing work. And look, you know, if they're lifeboats, if someone is drowning, it doesn't matter who they are or where they're from. It's their job to go and rescue them, and I thank them for doing that. But they shouldn't be put in that position.
But these people aren't drowning, and I'm like you.
They're at risk of it.
Julia, if they fall over the side, you know, I mean, there's always these sort of everyone's always got to start talking about the channel crossings and how dangerous and deadly they are, and all the rest of it, and the poor old migrants. No, I'm sorry. They know the dangers if they're adults. I agree with you with children. It's disgusting that they're taking children across and taking these risks with them. But when you think of how many people have drowned, you know, I mean, compared to how many people have got safely across, it's not as if everyone's falling out of these.
No, I mean, they are unsafe. My thing is, I don't see how any vaguely sensible human being could get on one of those dinghies and often without a life jacket and think that was a good idea. I don't know why they can't go and buy a life jacket. If they paid $2.5 grand, $3 grand to a people smuggler, it's utterly bewildering, isn't it? Claire, thank you.
Okay.
No, carry on, my love. What did you want to say there?
Oh no! Well, I thought they was provided by when they do get these life jackets.
No. Often you see them, they haven't got them. But again, I've just got you're in a safe country. It's not like you're fleeing war. You're in France, somewhere we most of us try and get to in the summer. Claire, thank you for your message. Georgina is in London. Georgina, they're taking Le Mick. What do we do about it?
Well, I would like to get the Prime Minister and his cabinet in a room and have a jolly good talk with all of them, to be honest. I mean, unless there is an invisible force field either side of that stupid gate, it's neither use nor ornament. And we're sending 500 million a year for that. Well, I can tell you now, the 500 million needs to be stopped immediately and used to fund our own border defence force. France is taking money off the British public under false pretences, and if the government can't see that, there is some kind of mental derangement going on.
Yeah, I just simply not beyond the wit of man. You have drones, you have police boats ready to go. I don't understand. I've said to you the other week, snipers to actually shoot holes in the boats from afar before the smugglers get the people on, so those boats instantly sink. I'm sorry, I don't believe this is beyond the wit of man at all.
Julia, this is not rocket science. No. This has been done in other countries with fabulous results. But you need the government to want to stop the boat.
And they don't really, because they don't believe in borders, really. Georgina, thank you for that. I can't talk for too long. Got to get to a break. But Tom Slater, I mean, I just think the British people, I think people who have been very sympathetic over the years are now just going, we're done now. We're done.
People have had enough, and you can understand why. Because no one ever voted for this situation. No one thinks it's tenable to carry on. And even the people who are seemingly horrified whenever someone tries to tackle this issue of illegal boat crossings, you think the status quo is terrible for everyone. You've created a set of incentives which says if you can run the gauntlet, risk your life, then you might be able to stay and work in the British black market economy. Is that a positive state of affairs for any nation?
And again, I think every single Channel death of this is down to the lefties and the bleeding hearters who say, come on in, the water's lovely. It turns out it's not. It's quite dangerous. 10:34 is the time. We'll take a break. Up next, going to talk to Brendan O'Neill about this and many other topics as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:37 is the time. Tom Slater's with me, editor of Spiked Online. In fact, your big mate and colleague, Brendan O'Neill, joins us right now, columnist and author, Brendan O'Neill. Very good morning to you.
Hi, Julia.
So much I want to get through. Let's start, though, first with those Trump tariffs. Chinese tariff war back. They're going to impose new tariffs equal to that 34%, which is on top of some 20% tariffs already on steel. They're going to be instigating those tomorrow. Donald Trump has said, if you do that, I'm going to put another 50%. We're going to look at some Chinese goods entering US markets being taxed at over 100% to arrive there. How do you think this ends?
Well, who knows? That's the answer to that question. It's very, very unpredictable. You know, I have to say, Julia, I envy people who have a very firm opinion on the tariffs regime because I don't really know either what's going on or how it will end. And I'm fully open to the idea that it's going to cause an economic cataclysm. I think it could bring about a depression. I think it could be bad for America and accidentally good for China, because lots of Asian countries in particular will look to China more than they do to the US market. So all of that is possible. But also the idea of reshoring industrial jobs to America is actually a good idea.
Yes.
And it's very easy for members of the knowledge industry to look down their noses at tariffs, but it's not their jobs that have been outsourced 5,000 miles away. It's not their towns that have gone to the wall because the things those towns used to make and produce they no longer do. It's not their towns that have been swept up by an opioid crisis, which has happened in a lot of these post-industrial towns in the United States. Bringing those jobs back to America would be good. Whether this is the right way to do it, there's a massive question mark over
And that's the thing, and we were discussing earlier, you know, if they're temporary, if they're permanent, if they're a negotiating position, if we know for sure what's going to happen, that will all impact whether or not a company makes a decision to move their jobs, you know, their manufacturing back to America. These things are not done on a whim of an announcement from a president who could change his mind tomorrow. I'm particularly worried about the prospect of you know, disunity in the West. And again, I completely understand why Donald Trump and Americans are fed up with Europeans who've been freeloading on the defence issue from American voters. Absolutely. He was right about that in his first term and much derided. Always said he was right about that, and we need to step up on our own defence. If we want to defend Europe, we should be doing it. But when the Western civilised world is divided, and we've got this ramping up of tensions, less tension with Russia because Trump is kind of trying to give away Ukraine to Russia, but ramping up of tensions with China, that worries me because, you know, China is a very powerful, massive economy and has a massive military, and we know is constantly doing things to undermine the West in terms of cybersecurity and undermining, you know, our values and our democracy. I'm very, very concerned that this could escalate into something that gets totally out of control.
Very much so. Trade wars have a habit of becoming real wars. We know that from history, and that is something everyone should be worried about. You know, I don't see the prospect of an American-Chinese war on the immediate horizon, but there could be proxy wars. If I was living in Taiwan, for example, I'd be quite worried at the moment. Who knows what could happen there? Yeah. These kinds of battles have a tendency to be fought out in other countries rather than in the main countries. But, you know, the thing is, I think what we're witnessing is something extraordinary, which is basically the end of globalization. And that's been the post-war order. Right since the end of the Second World War, we've had this globalizing dynamic, some of which has been pretty positive, more free trade, more exporting, more openness in relation to markets. But some of it's been negative, like globalist institutions like the European Union or the United Nations, which are not exactly paragons of democracy. All of that now is withering away. I don't think Trump caused the withering away of globalization, but my God, he is speeding it up with this tariff regime.
Well, indeed, but that links actually to another topic. And again, this idea of sort of, you know, borders, we're all linked together, one big happy family. Well, yeah, how's that working out when it comes to immigration, whether illegal or legal immigration? And we've got the people on the left only saying there's no such thing as someone who's illegal. Well, yeah, if you're illegally in a country, you're not allowed, have no right to be there. Yeah, you are illegal. But we've got two new stories regarding immigration. We've just been discussing. One is these absurd two barriers, gates, to apparently stop people smugglers from carrying their big dinghies and vans full of life jackets to the Calais beaches. It's a barrier that is only closed at night. You can just lift the barrier up, or you can just drive around it when it's closed because it's got flat green fields around it and no fencing. Will have cost tens of thousands of pounds, paid for by you and me, because it's part of that half a billion pounds of money we give every year to the French to tackle that issue. Meanwhile, when illegal migrants do get to this country, the solution is, according to more than 40 red wall Labour MPs, to have digital ID for everybody, because they say that will stop people working in the illegal black market. What do you make of those stories?
I mean, it's unbelievable. I thought the image of that pathetic gate in France, it was such a perfect illustration of the elite's attitude to borders, which is that they don't care about them. They don't believe in them. These are a post-borders elites, post-nationhood elites, and that image is just a beautiful illustration of their entire attitude to the idea of sovereignty, to the idea of nationhood itself. You know, my grandfather's farm in the west of Ireland has better borders than that. You know, he's got a proper stone wall around it to keep things in and to keep things out. It's a joke. It's a complete joke. And as for digital ID, for some in the Labour Party, that is their answer to everything. Every single problem that arises in society, especially someone like Tony Blair, his first thing, let's have digital ID. That will fix this problem. It's a fantasy. It could lead to authoritarian consequences for actual British people who live here legally, because we'd be bought into this as well. And it wouldn't help with illegal immigration. It just wouldn't solve the problem.
But virtually every country in Europe has digital ID cards. And of course, they don't have an illegal migrant problem at all, do they? I mean, it's genuinely absurd. But again, I don't know about you, but I was always opposed to a digital ID because I don't want to be a papers, please society. And we have a very different history. Trying to explain to Europeans, we don't have the same history they have. Most Europeans have lived under some sort of fascist or dictatorial regime for most, even of the last century. We had dictators in Portugal, in my living memory, for goodness sake. And we forget that democracy is very fragile and civil liberty is very fragile. We fought for ours. Quite literally, people fought and died for our rights over centuries, and we shouldn't give them away. So, like, someone could just say, demand our papers. If the police think there's wrongdoing, that they can ask you to present yourself at a police station. That's one thing. But you shouldn't have to just prove who you are all the time. And I particularly feel strongly about that post-lockdown and post the constant urge to require us to show our vaccine proof, vaccines to go to work and things like that, which I know you and I, we fought massively against. Always objected to that. I remember there was an event I was invited to, and you have to show proof of the vaccine or proof of a COVID test. And I'm like, well, I won't do it. And I did travel. But you've always been required for lots of countries to show proof of certain vaccines. That, to me, is a different issue. Within my own country, I reserve the right to go wherever I want, when I want, without people knowing who I am.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I remember when I was in Ireland during lockdown, you had to show your health status going into fast food restaurants, and they wouldn't let you in unless you showed them a card, which basically told them everything they needed to know about your health status in that moment. It was very, very creepy. We don't want that on a general scale. We don't want that for our future. The slogan I hate above all others is, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. I'm sorry, but the idea that we should throw open our entire lives to the establishment to prove we have nothing to hide, that is tyranny. And I don't think we should have to do that. We should hide whatever we want and live as freely as we want without breaking the law. It's none of their business what we do.
Yeah, exactly. The assumption that you're doing something wrong as opposed to the assumption you're doing something right. And again, they proved themselves to be very untrustworthy during that lockdown period. Just finally, again, talking of lockdown, people actually behind bars, let's talk about Lucy Connolly. She is the mum and mum of two and wife of a Tory councillor. She became, all over the front pages last year when she posted a message on X, on Twitter, which was horrible, a horrible, vile, racist tweet. There's no doubt at all about this in terms of about calling for mass deportations and saying, set fire to the asylum hotels for all I care. It was a nasty tweet. Now, she thought better of it 4 hours later. She deleted it. However, a couple of days later, she found herself in jail. She then got sentenced to 2.5 years behind bars. There's no evidence that anyone was inspired by her post to do anything. There's no evidence that this was anything other than a woman who we know had suffered from losing her own child. I mean, again, I don't know how anyone ever gets over that. She had post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of that. She was triggered by the knowledge that the children had been stabbed to death in Southport. A lot of people were angry and upset. There was misinformation going around that it was an asylum seeker that was responsible for that crime. Tensions were running high. She is still behind bars now, and she's been refused again and again leave to just go on home, go on home detention. She's no risk to anybody, first offender, and the like. And yes, she's still behind bars. Now, Elon Musk has criticised prison chiefs for denying her the right to return and spend temporary leave with her daughter and her husband, for whom she's a carer. What do you make of him getting involved in that?
It was kind of inevitable that he would get involved because he keeps a close eye on the crazy stuff that's happening in this country. And he's perfectly within his rights to do that. And he kicks up a storm about it, which, can eventually impact on the government. Yeah. So that might be interesting to see how that plays out. This entire case is it's genuinely repulsive. It is horrendous what has happened to this woman. I'm so glad that Alison Pearson at The Telegraph has drawn attention to this, and then Tom Slater, who's with you now at Spiked, has written a superb piece about it as well. This is a sickening case. She shouldn't have spent 1 second in a courtroom, never mind in a prison.
And you don't have to agree with what she said. I mean, she agrees that what she wrote was terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an awful tweet. And I think everyone knows that. Every normal person knows it was a terrible tweet that she shouldn't have written. But the idea that she should spend 31 months in a cell for something she wrote is gross. There are people who've committed violent acts who get less time than that. There was a man who went into a kosher deli in Golders Green last year with a huge knife, jabbed it in people's faces and said, tell me, the Jews' faces, and said, tell me your views on Israel and Palestine. He didn't spend 1 minute in jail. He got suspended sentence. Exactly. This is two-tier justice. You can wave a knife in Jewish people's faces and you don't go to jail. You write a tweet and you go to jail for 2.5 years. It's insane.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Brendan O'Neill, columnist and author, thank you very much. 10:49 is the time. Quick word from Tom Slater. I mean, I'm just getting your mates talking about each other. No, but this is, I mean, it's a really interesting piece. We talked about it on the show yesterday. Alison Pearson wrote this piece over the weekend. She spoke to the husband and got a lot of details about what's going on behind bars. But again, this is just sort of an average mum. Basically, it's been put behind bars. But the fact that so many people who commit offence after offence, even violent or sexual offences, don't go to jail, but because we had to sort of, show people, make an example of people, this woman is still behind bars for a tweet that she herself had already deleted before the police even got in touch because she realised what she'd done was wrong.
No, absolutely. What we've kind of witnessed in tandem, and you see this with the whole two-tier justice discussion, is the criminalisation of speech alongside the decriminalisation of violence, in effect.
Of actual crime.
People actually going around and menacing people, attacking people, spending derisory amount of times behind bars. Meanwhile, people who say things on the internet can be repulsive, racist things on the internet, as was the case.
And we're entitled to judge people for thinking and writing those things.
Absolutely. I do think sometimes it's not, one shouldn't downplay or dismiss what she said, whilst also recognising how outrageous it is that she was punished for it in this way. Yeah. So we need to hold those two ideas in our head at the same time. But I think everyone is now waking up to the absurdity that is punishing speech more harshly than punishing.
I mean, again, it was the left that constantly said, words are violence. Well, now words seem to matter more than violence. I've got to be honest with you. I think I'm always a bit more wary of being a victim of violence than words at every single time. And also the fact that she, all the people who she's a childminder, a huge number of those are actually immigrants themselves. They're, from Nigeria, from India, and they all wrote references to the court saying they'd never experienced anything resembling, racism. This was a completely out of character tweet. This is not some awful woman who's expressing her hatred of people and calling for violence towards people. This was totally out of character in a moment of madness. All of us might have a moment of madness sometimes, but maybe don't put it on Twitter. But this is the risk people play. But it's just extraordinary when somebody commits crime after crime after crime and doesn't go to jail. And then we put someone like her behind bars, and we release actual, people who've committed sexual assaults early from prison because we've run out of space. Properly insane. 10:51 is the time. Up next, we're going to be taking a quick break, and then we're going to be hearing from the former head of Royal Protection, Di Davies, about this case. Prince Harry in court right now in the Court of Appeal, asking for more security when he comes to the UK. But apparently, safe to come today. Who knew? This is Talk.
stabbed not just multiple times. One of them, I think, was stabbed 86 times, the other 92 times, and the third one a similar number. And the one that was stabbed 86 times, he only stopped stabbing her because he attempted to then remove her head. This was Axel Rudacabana, and the protests to which we're referring and where Lucy Connolly made her comments were in respect of those killings.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Well, Prince Harry has bravely come to unsafe Britain, despite living in a country where pretty much every other person seems to have a gun, to argue that he needs greater security when he is here. He's at the Court of Appeal today. Cases are running right now, where he is appealing against a ruling which dismissed his last challenge to the level of police protection he receives when he is in the UK. He claims that he cannot come to the UK with his family, with his wife and his kids, because he doesn't feel they are too safe. Now, the case is going to be heard for today and tomorrow in front of 3 judges. This dispute goes all the way back to 2020 and is one of a number of High Court battles he's fighting over recent years. Let's talk to Di Davies. He's former head of Royal Protection about this. Hello, Di.
Yes, good morning to you.
Thanks for joining us. It's always quite an interesting thing. We've seen that Prince Harry, he's come back to visit his father when he found out he had cancer. He's here for his court cases. He's returned, obviously, for the Queen's funeral and for the King's coronation. I mean, does his security differ every time, depending on whether it's a private visit or he's coming here for a state ceremony? And what is the level of security that he's concerned about?
Well, it's a complex old scenario because RAVEC, the committee that decides the level of security, as I understand it, have come up that if he gives notice, they will consider each visit, depending on what it is, on its merits. In terms of risk assessment, every time he comes, somebody, I can assure you, will have carried out a risk assessment. The truth is, they decided, rightly or wrongly, 3.5, 4 years ago, that he wasn't entitled to 24/7 protection like his father and his brother because he no longer is a working member of the royal family. As I understand it, he always has a liaison officer from my former command, Royalty Protection. In other words, he will get a liaison officer. One of his beefs is that his current security, who many of them are ex-Royalty Protection officers paid 3 times what they would have been by the Met, they are still with him. They know perfectly well the score. If there is a risk to him, no government department will hide it, not make them aware. So this is all a complete, utter nonsense and a waste of your money and mine.
That's interesting because I thought one of the concerns he had is that his security can't have guns, even if they're ex-Royal Protection, ex-Met. They can't carry guns because they're private security, and he wants people who could protect him and his wife and his kids if he's here. I've always been rather sympathetic. It's on the basis that he doesn't need protection because he's a working royal. He needed protection because he's the son of the king and he fought in Afghanistan on behalf of Britain and the British forces. He's a double target because of that. It doesn't matter whether he's living off Netflix royalties or whatever. He's still a royal. I don't think that the Islamist extremists and others who would try and harm him really care whether he's working in the royal family or not. So to me, he's always at risk and deserves that security. Surely that's the case.
Well, I understand that point of view, and to a degree I have some sympathy. But as I say, each visit, each time will be assessed. I lecture on the history of attacks, I'm pleased to say, on a number of cruise ships and other places, on the history of attacks. And I can assure you, the number of times Royalty Protection officers have had to draw a firearm and protect are almost non-existent. The only last real time was Princess Anne, when she was attacked in the Mall. So the truth is, you don't really need, as far as I know, and of course I'm retired now, a gun to protect anyone in this country. Yes, certain members of the royal family do get it because of their status, and again, somebody much wiser than I now have decreed that is a risk. I say again, if there was a substantial, credible risk, he will get the appropriate
Get the
protection.
security. I just wonder, we don't always know in advance that there's going to be an attack. That's the worry. I'm like,
Well,
look,
yes,
I
but-
rarely take Prince Harry's side on anything, but on this, I'm like, I want him to feel safe. That said, I find it extraordinary that people like, say, Nigel Farage has been forced to pay for his own security for years when he's at risk. I think all public figures should be protected if they need
I
it.
think you've got a point, but unfortunately, it is a limited budget.
Yeah.
And it'd be lovely to give everybody. But I also am aware the number of his cousins, aunties, and others no longer, and one could argue that they are as much at risk because of their status and what they've been.
I think they're not as high profile. I think that's magic. He's chosen to be more high profile, hasn't he? We'll have to leave it there. Dar Davies, thank you so much. Very quick word from Tom Slater on that.
No, I do see both sides of this. On the one hand, surely he can fund this himself, but there's obviously the special protections, the special coverage, the things that basically the Home Office won't allow you and your security guards to do.
I think he's going to lose this case again. I mean, he's basically bringing cases against his father's government, His Majesty's government. I think he's going to lose it again, but it's interesting. He always feels safe to come here when he wants to come here. But again, he says he won't be with the family. I think it's more down to Meghan not wanting to come, to be honest. She's busy making jam and bath salts. Anyway, this is Talk. We hold the home of common sense.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
B Plus Radio or on your smart speaker. Watch it on YouTube or your connected device. Great to have your company. Going to be talking more in this hour about those tariffs. The trade war and the war of words between Donald Trump and the Chinese is really hotting up. We are in a situation now where China has accused the US of economic bullying. Could it ramp up even further? Chinese tariffs are going to come back in tomorrow. Donald Trump has said in the White House yesterday, if China does do their retaliatory tariffs against the US retaliatory tariffs against already existing Chinese tariffs, then the US would retaliate again with tariffs on some Chinese imports of 50%. That means some of their imports would be facing a total of over 100% tariffs. At this point, American consumers might notice since virtually everything they buy is coming from China. But are we going to then get cheaper imports? Do you think that is possible? Will we benefit? Or are we also going to be victims of that tariff war? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Certainly, the US president had told Americans not to panic and criticised critics within his own party as panicans. Also talking more about the French officials who have been criticised. I mean, I just said they've been taking le mic for spending British taxpayers' cash on road barriers that are utterly pathetic. They're supposed to stop small boat crossings. There are 2 road barriers. They probably cost tens of thousands of pounds. They were paid for out of the £500 million a year that we send to the French to help tackle smuggling. And they are basically 2 posts with a barrier. It's only down during the night time, so in daytime you could just drive through it, and it's got green flat fields on either side, so you could just drive around it. But apparently that is supposed to stop people smugglers getting those boats to the Calais shore. Your thoughts on that? Greatly appreciated. Also, the fact that more than 40 Labour MPs, the Red Wall MPs who were worried about losing their seats next time round, they've called for the government to introduce digital ID cards to tackle illegal migration, because there has never yet been a problem that some people don't think that digital ID cards are the answer to. Well, your thoughts on all of those topics, gratefully received. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, text on 87222, get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. In particular, I want to know, should we just stop giving France? We give them £476 million a year, so pretty much £2 billion we've given them in the last 4 years. Have the boats stopped? Have they diminished? No, they haven't. Fewer boats, but more people on them. What is the point? What is the point of giving them that money? Well, we were told, oh, it would be much worse if we didn't give them that money. Really? How much worse can it be with tens of thousands of young men coming from we know not where, because they often don't have any ID on them? I'm not sure the digital ID is going to solve that problem, given that most of Europe has digital ID cards and they've got the same problem there. But there we are. What do I know? I'm not Tony Blair, the king of the digital ID. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Tom Slater, look, we're going to talk about Trump's tariffs in a few moments with the economics editor of The Spectator. So let's focus on this this issue of these barriers. I mean, again, if you are just listening and not watching, I cannot convey to you how unbelievably embarrassingly bad this barrier is. I mean, it's literally like a gate. I'm a gate person. I'm going to go roughly 6 foot. It's got just a single barrier, just a single, line of wood or whatever going down, and it's open. It's open for at least 12 hours a day, and you can drive around it. And we've paid for it. The French are taking le mic. Tom Slater, should we simply say you get no more cash?
Well, certainly if this is what the results look like. I mean, we know that over the course of many years in which now successive governments have been throwing money at Paris in the hopes that it will solve this problem, we haven't seen results. We've seen often kind of anecdotal and video evidence of boats essentially being allowed to cast off.
I mean, we're literally seeing the French police standing there with their jeté. Little shrug.
And it's one of those things where, of course, you can set up all of the little committees you like. You can do all the kind of sharing of intelligence back and forth you like. You can throw as much money as you like. The fundamental issue is one of incentives. They have a much higher incentive, frankly, to allow the migrants to leave so that they are someone else's problem. So it's a grim logic, but it is the logic nonetheless. And therefore, until you take responsibility for your own migration policy, for your own borders, for making sure that it's dealt with in a very clear-cut, actually genuinely democratic but also humane way, then you're going to have these problems.
I'm not for people who say leave them to drown, shoot them, and they're like, no, I'm not in favour of any of that. I'm sorry, these are human beings. We don't have a duty of care to look after these people when they come to our shore. We do have a duty of care to stop them from dying. I'm sorry, that's how being a civilised nation works.
We talked about this earlier, but the more that we've allowed this situation to take place, which is essentially if you can risk it all, if you can pay all this money to this people smuggler, if you can, again, run this horrendous gauntlet, then maybe you'll get a chance to work in the British black market economy.
Yay.
It's not a positive
enslave labour and be exploited
story.
for the rest of your life.
And it's risking people's lives. So therefore, it should be addressed. Can we expect the French to do so? No. Given those incentives, probably not.
No, exactly. They're quite happy. They want to make a problem for us. We were told, if it hadn't been for Brexit. No, they weren't dealing with it before Brexit. And the only reason it got worse is they basically closed down one of the routes. That's the thing. I was in Paris at the weekend. You're on the Eurostar. Much more security. You can see all the big barriers up. There used to be people sneaking through the tunnel, sneaking onto, getting there, getting to vehicles. That still happens, but nothing like on the same scale. Why? Because they put up the security. Now, it's different having security around a tunnel or around the ferry companies is rather different from having security along hundreds of miles of Calais beaches, except that. But we do have technology now. We have drones, we have infrared cameras. We can see when people are setting off. It is not beyond the wit of man. Those boats come from somewhere. It is just, you just make it harder. And once you get into the water, we're just going to come in and we're going to tow you back. It's as simple as that. That's all they need to do. You only have to do that, with all the boats for a month. They just stop doing it. The people will stop coming and you've broken that market. And if anyone does get here, you pick them up and you take them back. And the French accepted them back. Those migrants would not stay in France. They wouldn't go there in the first place. But if they did stay in France, not my problem. Not my problem. If you choose to be in the Schengen area and have open borders with basically the entire world, which is what it is in Europe, that's your choice. But it's not my problem. And if the French won't deal with it, then we have to do what Australia did. And we need to make sure that no one gets to our shore or stays for more than like 24 hours and they are simply taken somewhere else. I don't care whether it's an island in the Outer Hebrides, the Falklands. I don't think people in the Falklands deserve this, or anywhere else, Rwanda, anywhere else we pay. You're not going to come to Britain. You're not going to be our problem. And life is not going to be very nice. And that only works, and I think Rwanda wouldn't have worked. I thought the principle was right. I support the right of democratic elected politicians and government to push your policy and not have it stopped by, stymied by an unelected, unaccountable court or indeed by the human rights lawyers, because it's not a human right to go and live anywhere you sodding well want in this world. It's not. But you'd have to have done it on the Australian basis, which is that it's not just a few hundred people and you've got a chance of being deported to Rwanda. Everybody. It has to be everybody. You come here illegally, you are immediately removed. Nothing to discuss. And we won't move you back to Afghanistan because apparently we can't do that. Well, fine, then we'll move you somewhere else. But life's not going to be good. They will stop coming. We know that because that's what happened in Australia. That policy under Tony Abbott worked 100% and it worked within months.
And this whole question of illegal migration, it's bedevilled, obviously, successive governments in different forms. It's worth saying that, you know, before we had the small boats, we had a lot of people coming through the Channel Tunnel on lorries and so on. You kind of shut down one route, another one opens up. But at the same time, it's clearly at a very acute point now. And it's become a question of whether or not the government is capable of acting at all, whether or not it can actually, even having been voted through on a mandate of controlling migration, as basically every Tory government was, whether they actually wanted to or not is a bit of an open question. Can they do anything? Can they enforce any law that they already have? Can they get a handle on these immigration tribunals where apparently, you know, the more sex offences you have on your rap sheet, the more likely you are to be allowed to stay? I mean, if they can't, then people are really going to have a lot of questions, not just about the migration issue and how to deal with it, but also just about whether or not politics can achieve anything, even as simple as kind of securing security.
And again, and we can see we can see Trump's victory in the US. We can see Reform UK doing well in the polls here. We can see the rise of the AfD, the Marine Le Pen's rally in National, Rassemblement National, and Giorgia Meloni's party in Italy. It's across the board. There's a reason why this is happening. If the mainstream parties refuse to deal with it, voters will find someone who will.
No, absolutely, and who in many cases might have some quite unpleasant solutions to these kinds of things. If you create a situation where the only person even willing to talk about an issue are sometimes the insurgents, sometimes the people who are genuinely a bit extreme, that's a bad situation to be in.
And there really are some people who I think are far too extreme on this. We are talking about human beings. Now, there may be economic migrants who've got no right to be here, but I'm sorry, but we should still always be a civilised country. But we don't. To be a civilised country, to be humane, doesn't mean being a soft touch. You know, I'm sorry. You know, there's a difference between sort of shooting someone in your garden path and having your door locked and refusing to let them in. Those are two different things. One is perfectly acceptable and one is not. But I don't love the fact, and we discussed it earlier, but it just blows my mind. The solution from a bunch of Labour MPs, more than 40 of them, the Red Wall lot, basically the ones who are just sort of more on the, I would say, the sort of rather saner end of these issues, are saying normally is saying, look, you know, you need to deal with the economy, you need to deal with immigration, but you know, one of the things we're going to have to deal with is the illegal migrants working the black economy. It's one of the reasons they come here. They're not just sitting in hostels all day, I'm afraid. Even not that's bad on its own, but having digital ID cards for everybody. The idea is that, well, if you have a digital ID card, employers will know whether you're legally able to work or not. But as we were discussing earlier, they can tell that anyway by asking for your ID, your passport. And I'm sorry, and if you haven't got a passport but you're a foreigner in this country, then you are here illegally. Sorry, isn't that kind of the proof?
And it's one of those things where if you think about it for longer than 30 seconds, it's obvious where the pitfalls go into it. You know, oh, we should just change the law. You're dealing with people who've entered the country illegally, who are working for illegal criminal networks.
They won't break the law.
It's like, of course, they'll sign up on day one for their new digital requirement. I mean, it's obviously ridiculous. And I think it's also, but it's a reminder, I think, that if we do want to kind of maintain that more liberal sort of English tradition of not being a papers please society and all the rest of it, you do have to properly govern. You do have to enforce the laws that you currently have in relation to black market labour, whatever it might be. You
and
do
we
have
don't
to
enforce them.
And you do have to make sure you know who is coming in and out of the country and why. That's a pretty fundamental, basic
And we
thing.
don't do that.
which we don't do anymore.
There is a record officially. You scan. You have everything. It used to be pieces of paper. It's sort of scanned, but no one actually ever checks it. No. There are about 1 million people in this country who've overstayed their visas, either tourist visas or work visas or study visas, and we don't do anything. These people are living in plain sight. We just go, okay. All right, just carry on though. I don't understand why anyone thinks that those people shouldn't be deported. If I overstayed my visa in a country, I would expect to be deported. I don't think that's a human rights issue. And
it's that recognition that freedom that we want to enjoy and whatever, it's kind of premised on the basics being sorted out in that sense, and they haven't been for a very long time. And naturally, the more that you have failure in this area, the more that you have grasping for authoritarian solutions. That's just always how this plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as you said, just enforce the laws we've actually got. But also, again, the punishments need to be severe for employers. I mean, there have been rules brought in about, letting flats, letting homes to people who aren't here legally. And landlords need to be... the fines... the punishment, possibly even imprisonment, they need to be very severe, because no one does it accidentally. You simply ask for someone's ID, and if you've reasonably asked for ID, you've been shown. Maybe they've got really good fake ID, but you've actually asked for it. Maybe we'll have a database of of people in the country. Now, I have a right to live completely freely in this country, but if you are here as a guest of our country, as a foreigner, then you don't have a right. You don't have the same rights as citizens of a country. You don't. I don't have the same rights when I'm in France or America as I have here, because I'm not in my own country. And that seems to me to be perfectly reasonable. But it is the idea that you need a digital ID card for everybody, because some employers are totally unscrupulous and will basically take on someone illegal. Why are they taking on a legal migrant? Why? Because they don't have to pay them the minimum wage, so that they don't have to give them the basic rights, and so these people can't complain when they're treated badly. I'm sorry, those employers need to be in prison. Not, by the way, what I want to talk about next, which is women who've written a dodgy message on X. But this is the thing, if we just simply enforce the law that exists already, this problem could be, there's always going to be some people who break the law, of course there will be, but we can really tackle this issue very quickly if there is a will.
Absolutely, because it's not really about migration, is it? No. Tony Blair thinks ID cards are a solution to migration, to the health service, to Andrew Tate, maybe,
everything.
I don't know. Whatever it is, everything under the sun, every kind of little moral panic or serious issue that we might confront, it's always, let's have ID cards or let's crack down on social media. Those are basically the two policy options that Labour in particular are particularly keen on. And
Tories are just as bad on that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, if nothing else, it reflects a record of failure, and it reflects a shallowness of thinking in terms of how do you actually deal with some of these problems.
Absolutely. But I do want to just mention Lucy Connolly again. Elon Musk has defended the Lucy Connolly and hit out the treatment of her by prison authorities. She's the mother of 2 kids, carer for her sick husband, who is a Tory councillor. She was jailed for 2.5 years for a post about the wake of the Southport attack. It was a vile, horrible, racist post saying, I don't care, burn down the hotels with the asylum seekers in them, mass deportations now, if that makes me racist, so be it. She says she deleted it after 4 hours. She's very traumatised by having lost her own child. Post-traumatic stress disorder had been diagnosed, years of therapy. No one gets over having that, and it's down to medical negligence at the hospital where the child was. So I don't think anyone gets over that. That's going to trigger you when you see that 3 children have been stabbed to death. Of course, the rumours going around that it was an asylum seeker. Her reaction was off scale, it was unacceptable, it was unpleasant, it was foul. We have a right to judge her for that and to think less of her for that. But also, once you understand the mitigations, perhaps being a bit more understanding, the fact that she was persuaded to plead guilty to get a lesser sentence, as virtually everybody who was charged in relation to posts related to that were basically advised, plead guilty, you get less sentence. And in fact, the book was thrown at them. But the fact that we only a few months ago, we had violent criminals, seasoned repeat offenders and sex assaulters being allowed out of prison early to make sure that a mum with an unblemished record, who is a childminder, and by the way, for a lot of children of immigrant parents who all gave references to the fact that this woman was not a racist, she was a lovely, kind, wonderful woman, that she should then spend 2.5 years behind bars. Other people who've committed violent crimes, other women being allowed out on early release, but under curfew with a tag to be back at home with their families. And she's got young children. She's not been allowed that because they're basically making an example of her. I'm not that keen actually on Elon Musk getting involved in every single case in this. He thinks that Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner. He doesn't understand. He doesn't pay attention to enough detail. But she is a political prisoner at this point, because this woman, she did something wrong. She should have had a slap for it, but I don't even think she should have a criminal record for what she wrote. Certainly not a prison term, and certainly not a 2.5-year prison term when people who commit proper violent offences against people either don't get jail time or serve much less.
I mean, we just have to get back to brass tacks here. Should someone be in prison for 2 years and 7 months, as it originally was, for words on the internet?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Should that happen, particularly in the context of people who physically assault people, sexually assault people, not even serving anything like that time? That's obviously a complete nonsense. Yeah. Should we be willing to criticise it? Absolutely. I mean, I'm to be honest, whether or not she is as despicable as that tweet would suggest, whether or not that was a moment of madness, whether or not she just completely lost it that day, I don't really care.
If that was what she always thought.
It's the fundamental point, which is that the question of speech should not lead you to being locked up. I know people have said, well, this was incitement to violence. Incitement to violence is a very specific category. Yeah. It should mean, I think it's not necessarily in UK law, the fact that you're really getting close to basically commissioning a crime. You're standing in front of a mob saying attack.
I want to talk to me at 4 o'clock outside this Asylum hotel and we're going to burn it down.
Yeah.
That you should go to jail for.
Absolutely. Someone kind of sounding off into the ether and it ended up catching on and going viral is a very different kettle of fish.
Absolutely.
And that's just something that we need to recognise, not because we like the speech involved.
You don't have to like the person, you have to agree with
we don't like the censorship, that's the main thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's general if people think things like that. I'd rather know, even if it's in a moment of madness. Which has got an appeal coming up in mid-May. The Free Speech Union is going to be representing her. So, I mean, I just think this is just madness. The two-tier justice thing is, I think, one of the biggest sort of chasms in our and most damaging things that's going on in our country right now. The fact that people are being treated differently depending on their political views, I think, is getting really, really dangerous, and we need to stop it. Right, we're going to take a quick break. I do want to hear from you, particularly about anything we're talking about. Lucy Connolly, you want to talk about tariffs, you want to talk about the ridiculous inability of the French and for us to stop the illegal migrants coming over on boats. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, text 87222 to us as well. You can send us a message on X at Talk TV. Calls on are charged at the national rate. Text cost one standard network rate message. Love to hear from you. We're going to take your calls a little bit later this hour. Up next, we're going to be talking to the economics editor at The Spectator about those Trump tariffs and where it could all lead. That's coming up next. This is Talk.
all the time are accused of one thing more than anything else, and that's breaking their promises. This is something which you can't level at Donald Trump, especially regarding tariffs, because not just in this election, but as old as the hills, Donald Trump has been going on about how America needs tariffs to protect American jobs and American livelihoods and their manufacturing sector. So this is something he's been saying for a long time, and people who are now acting surprised that he's actually followed through with it, I think need a bit of a reality check.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater still with me as well here at Talk. Let's talk right now about Trump tariffs with Michael Simmons. He's economics editor at The Spectator. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I wouldn't mind if you wouldn't mind helping us out here in terms of a little bit of explanation of where we are, what the latest is, because everyone is issuing retaliatory tariffs against, well, particularly China and the US. What state are we at and how much the tariffs got up to now?
Well, it's all go, isn't it? You've had Trump yesterday that's basically said that in retaliation to China's retaliation, he's going to put this extra 50% tariff on Chinese goods that are already tariffs, which means that the taxes that the US consumer, US businesses will have to pay on imports from China in some cases is going to be over 100%.
Yep.
So basically, we're in this huge escalation of the trade war, certainly between China and America. But in a sort of more promising sign, it looks like Britain, at least, is not going to join the retaliation.
Yeah, but I saw a survey saying that more than 50% of Brits think that we should be retaliating with an equal 10% tariff against the US. But so what we were saying, consumers are saying, what I'd really like is to pay 10% more for anything I'm buying from America. That's what that means, isn't it? Our price is going up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's my sort of gut instinct as well. Is America are doing this to us.
Yeah, sod you. Yeah.
Too. But, yeah, exactly. But I think when you look at the economics behind it, you really have to ignore that, because what a tariff is it's a tax on yourself. You know, it's just going to make goods more expensive.
Yeah.
And what we should be seeing in Britain is actually this is an opportunity that if America is going to try and, rebalance how its economy works, is going to step away from free trade, then that should be an opportunity for the country that in the world is the most similar to America, which is Britain. How can we become the new leaders of this free trade world?
Except we're not such a big market as America. There's lots of talk about us becoming, Singapore on Thames, and if you come, you basically go complete free trade. But there is an argument for some tariffs, isn't there? I mean, I don't think there's a full, I'm not in favour of this tariff war. I think it'll all end horribly badly. And I think the various aims that Donald Trump has himself stated about, we're going to bring back, onshore all this manufacturing, and these permanent and they're temporary, and we can negotiate and not negotiate. Well, and we're going to make a load of money out of these tariffs, even though, of course, we're going to force people to cut their tariffs so they wouldn't be. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's all mutually exclusive. He's not going to achieve all of the things he says he can achieve. But there's an argument for tariffs to protect some key industries, to protect, our vital agriculture, to protect steel, and particularly against countries like China, where there are massive state subsidies, which make it impossible for anyone in the West to compete.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, and there is, just as these blanket tariffs are not sensible. I think it also wouldn't be sensible to say, well, look, you just do nothing.
Yeah.
I think a general retaliation is silly, but there are certain things that you have to watch out for. So in the American sense, I don't think anyone would complain about tariffs on, say, microchips, which is such an important part of American development. And over here, what we're probably going to see with China essentially being shut off from US markets is they're going to try and dump already cheap goods onto Europe and onto Britain. Now, there might be an argument that on very specific industries and areas of manufacturing that Britain might want to do something there to stop our markets being flooded with Chinese goods. But I think generally there is more benefit in, being open to that, being open to something that's potentially going to grow the economy.
Right. So we could end up with a load of cheap goods, and a lot of it cheap tap. But let's be honest, we buy a heck of a lot from China. If you're buying on Amazon, I think 80% of goods are made in China, and the other 20% have components, have some element that comes from China, and they are dominating the world. But the reality is, of course, China relies on that income to keep not just its economy going, but also its political system and its military going. There's a kind of a trade, like, okay, you don't have political freedom in China, but the middle class can keep getting wealthy. Well, if that isn't the case with economic tariffs, then that can be very destabilising for China. So there are lots of other risks there in terms of what they're willing to do. China has accused the US of economic bullying. The rhetoric seems to have been ramping up between those two countries, and I've always thought this is more about China than it is about say, Europe, you've got pretty much the same costs of doing business in America and Europe, other than energy costs, of course, which are much cheaper in America. So, but China is a different kettle of fish. But are you fearful that, and as has happened many times in the past, that an economic warfare can turn into military warfare?
Well, I think we're quite far away from that, but it's certainly, a risk. We're in this ridiculous topsy-turvy situation where I think yesterday the Chinese Foreign Ministry was tweeting out videos of Ronald Reagan espousing sort of the glories and the pros of free trade. I mean, it's ridiculous that's the world that Trump has now created. But look, with neither China or America seem willing to back down. The rhetoric is escalating. China this morning basically saying they're going to go, fight till the end. I think when the language gets like that, we're in a worrying position. But I also think that China and Donald Trump are not stupid. They would not want this to turn into an actual war, but miscalculations happen.
And that's the worry. But the thing is, the crucial thing about this now, Donald Trump has said, these panicons, these people who are in the Republican Party who are panicking too much about this. Hey, relax. But the reality is, his election, we were talking about this on the show yesterday at the end of last week, his election wasn't just about immigration and wokeism and all that and net zero. It was about the economy, stupid. It always is, every election, the cost of living. People were freaking out about the cost of eggs a few weeks ago in America. Now the cost of eggs has come down. This is like after an avian flu and millions of chickens having to be destroyed. But when the price of your car, which is an absolute vital necessity for every American, the price of pretty much every white good you buy, any tech you buy, all the expensive stuff, when that stuff is shooting up by 50%, 100% in price, then they're really going to notice it more than the price of eggs. That doesn't bode well, particularly you've got the midterm elections coming up in only a year's time, or a year and a half's time in America as well. Republicans are getting worried, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is going to come down to, one, what the markets, and two, more importantly, what the American consumer is prepared to put up with. If you look at the people who are advising Trump, what their ideology seems to be here, it basically seems to come down to they don't think that it's advantageous anymore for America for the dollar to be the world reserve currency. They think if that status can change, then American exports can become cheaper and that can bring in revenue to the country. Now, for that to happen, Trump has to sort of bring his population with him, because there are going to be negative effects of these tariffs. There are going to be, as you point out, inflation. They're going to be, potentially a recession. And I feel like Trump has not sort of explained the ideology. That's not very Trump.
Well, he's talked about the medicine. People have to take their medicine, but they will benefit soon.
Well, exactly, but I don't think he's done enough to, you really have to go digging to find out what this ideology is. And to carry it through, it's going to take months and months of pain. And ultimately, as popular as, Trump was within his own electorate, when they start paying more for things, when they start losing their jobs, are they going to stick by him? I don't think not.
And as I said, also, even the practicalities, they say we're going to raise a load of billions and billions, which we're going to put towards our multi-trillion-dollar debt. But okay, that's great if you're going to get it from the tariffs. But if you do negotiate free trade deals, you don't have those tariffs, you're not going to raise that money. And equally, you're not going to be bringing onshoring on, because again, if you negotiate and then those tariffs aren't there, there'd be no reason for anyone to onshore. Plus, it's one thing someone choosing to onshore, if they're a German car manufacturer moving to America, but you ain't going to be moving from Cambodia or Malaysia or China to America when the cost difference in labour is and regulation and everything is so great that it completely vastly outweighs any of the tariff costs. Just finally, back here in the UK, we've had Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves trying to calm everybody. I think Rachel Reeves is in Parliament today answering some questions, sticking to this line, that they're not going to do anything, not going to retaliate, they've got a consultation out. But it did occur to me, although this is going to damage the British economy, and it will, short term, who knows long term, it's kind of given the Labour Party a bit of a get-out clause, because we were looking at absolutely damning economic stats coming in, certainly in time for the autumn budget, possibility of more tax rises, more spending cuts, borrowing costs going up. And now it could well be the case that she's got an excuse that, well, it's all Donald Trump's, it's the orange man's fault. It's not my fault the economy is in such a bad way. She's got a get out of jail card, hasn't she?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's going to be incredibly difficult. I think when the OBR looked at the potential impact of tariffs for the spring statement. They basically said if what happens now is happening, which it is, it would wipe out her headroom again.
Yeah.
So we're going to be back in this position in the autumn where she's going to have to raise taxes or cut spending or potentially ditch her fiscal rules. And she now has a perfect excuse to do this. We already saw it a bit yesterday with them changing the rules on vans as part of net zeros. This is something that they know, the net zero rules specifically, that if they want Britain to grow, they need to push back on those, and that's something hard to do when it's so popular among their own electorate.
Yeah, and they say they're not ideological about it. Yeah, they are, because you can't be practical about it because those rules are insane.
Exactly, they are nuts, and I think Rachel Reeves probably does know that, and this will maybe give her a cover to do some things that Labour voters won't like.
Well,
so.
As I've always said, none of the net zero rules are going to survive any contact with reality. We know that. You only have to be a 6-year-old who can do some basic adding up to know that it doesn't make sense. But there we are. Michael Simmons, great to talk to you. Very much appreciate that. Economics editor of The Spectator. Tom Slater still listening to this and still joining us. This is the thing. I mean, I can't quite work out the ideology behind the Trump thing, other than making America great again. I'm not sure making America poorer, certainly in the short term, is going to do that. But that's an interesting point Michael Simmons made about, what is the ideology and such as we can make it out, preparing the American people. Because we saw that in Argentina, didn't we, where Milei is elected like, OK, I'm going to be, slashing public spending, taxes are going to go up, but we're going to get the economy sorted. Massively, massively popular when he was elected, still popular even after doing all those things, but he prepared the ground.
No, absolutely. You prepare both the markets as well as your own domestic voters.
Liz Truss, take note.
Absolutely. I mean, John McDonnell did more to roll the pitch for Corbynomics than Liz Truss did for her mini budget. It's just that in his case, it got rejected at the ballot box rather than in the financial markets, the bond markets rather. But it's this is a really important point. If you're going to do a big break with the status quo economically in whatever direction, people need to be behind you. People need to be know what you're doing. They need to have a clear sense of what the next steps are, a kind of sense of stability, even if it is a break with the past. That really hasn't been there with this. It makes it very hard to even judge as to in what direction it's going.
Exactly. I think the blind MAGA devotion and the Trump devotion syndrome, where people go, oh, it's brilliant. Like, he has given a different explanation of what the achievement will be and when it will be achieved every single time he's spoken. So I don't think Donald Trump even knows. I detect from watching some of his press conference yesterday from the Oval Office and all of his men, his right-hand men sitting near him, I detect a certain oops. I really do. I think there's a little oops feeling, but there we are. Anyway, Rachel Reeves is actually up in the House of Commons and she's speaking about Trump's tariffs. We'll bring you anything significant that she says. I promise not to do an impression. I will behave. I do not promise. Anyway, 11:37 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk to a migration expert about, well, how do we stop those boats? Is it a barrier that you can drive around or just drive through when it's open? Or is it a digital ID? Any of that going to work? I mean, you and I both know the answer to that. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Coming up to 11:40, I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater still with me. Let's talk once again about just, well, how do we stop illegal migration? I mean, somehow there must be a way of doing it. I'm pretty sure you and I could solve it if we've got the will to do it, which none of our politicians seem to do. But let's talk about this with our commentator and migration expert, Dr. Mike Jones. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks
Great
for joining us. Well, two suggestions we've had today. One is in the Sun newspaper, and it's extraordinary, this image of this barrier. There are two barriers that have been built, apparently to stop the people smugglers taking the dinghies and the life jackets by vans onto the Calais beaches. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see it. If you're listening on DAB Plus Radio on your smart speaker, you can't. Please take a look. Take a look at our YouTube page. This will blow your mind. It's just like a barrier. It's just like the entrance to a car park, basically. But the barrier is open all day, just closed at night. I don't know if the people smugglers can work that out if they've got watches, but also it's on a completely flat bit of land. There's just a field on either side. People could literally just drive around it. It's so pointless. Plus, we've had Labour MPs, more than 40 of them, Red Wall seats and others, urging the government to bring in digital ID because they reckon that will stop illegal migrants being able to work on the black market. Do you think either of these things will work?
No, I mean, the barrier, as you say, is surrounded by open flat fields. So all you need is a 4x4 to circumnavigate it, and you don't need the driving skills of a Colin McRae to get from point A to point B. You know, sure, the barrier will annoy the people smugglers, but it's not going to stop them trafficking the boat parts. It's a minor annoyance, nothing more, nothing less. Yeah. As for the ID cards, no, I mean, we have existing forms of identification already. National insurance numbers, they're linked to tax, welfare and employment. And obviously you have passports, which is, you know, a universally recognised form of ID.
And if you're not British and you're here, you would have a passport, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So an employer can simply ask for your passport and say, have you got a right to work here? Oh, you don't appear to. There you are, I don't employ you. There's nothing complicated about it, is there?
No, not at all. And, you know, it's a diversion from the root causes, which is the legal system we have here in the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, a digital ID card system would be hideously expensive. Yeah. I mean, I remember back in 2005, I think the LSE estimated that the cost of such a scheme would be between 10 to 19 billion.
Wow. OK, so it'll end up costing 50 billion, giving it public said. But also the failure rate. I mean, even if you thought it was a good system, it would work, someone being correctly identified or incorrectly identified, we know the failure rate, if it were used all the time, would be huge. But the main thing is, why should I'm a British citizen, why should I need to be having, I mean, there's no point in having it unless you're required to have it on you, is there? Why should I be required to show digital ID to do anything? I'm not breaking the law. All you need to do is just simply check the people who are clearly not from here. Is that not a good start?
I agree 100%. I mean, there's a huge danger with ID cards. An element of mission creep could get in there. So, because you'd have to have a sort of national database. And, you know, ask yourself, Julia, do you trust the government to manage this correctly and in a way that's consistent with liberal democracy? You know, look at the clampdowns on free speech, the debanking scandal.
Yeah.
You know, you could have a slippery slope there to some sort of social credit system where the ID cards would make very little difference to illegal immigration, but it could be weaponized against the law-abiding population.
Absolutely, and we saw that in terms of your vaccine ID, your COVID ID during lockdown. Again, if I had ever been creeping towards the idea of thinking, yeah, we have to get with the 21st century, it's going to be digital ID, that absolutely put paid to that. And I think most people are just totally unaware of how this is used in countries like China, where they absolutely, you can't enroll at university, you can't get on a plane or a train if you haven't got the right social credit. You can't even buy from a vending machine unless you've got enough social credits. And, you know, if you've, for instance, criticised the government or you are friends with someone who's criticised the government, things like that, you lose your social credits. It is so sinister. It's beyond Orwellian. It's Hollywood scary dystopian fiction. And people go, yeah, but, you know, it will stop illegal migrants. But, of course, the vast majority of EU countries, other than Denmark and Ireland, have digital ID, and they have a massive problem with illegal migration. So why on earth would it work here?
Well, it won't. It's a diversion from the root causes. And the root causes are linked to the legal architecture we have here in the UK, specifically the Human Rights Act. We don't have a deterrent effect. When people arrive, rather than being detained in a detention centre and sent back to their country of origin within a very short space of time, they're allowed to stay, they're allowed to apply for asylum. And within the asylum system, some of them are given the green flag to go through, whereas others are rejected, but they can appeal. And then you have this sort of merry-go-round legal process. And it's very difficult to deport people because of Articles 3 and Articles 8 of the Human Rights.
And we've had that forever. I want to point out, though, if we did deport them just back to France, the trouble is they probably wouldn't be able to get over or around that barrier, those two barriers, because unless they were, you know, able to sort of get their shoes a bit muddy in the green fields on either side, or they remember to go during daylight hours, that might cause a barrier for them returning. Just thought I'd raise that. Mike Jones, great to talk to you, migration expert Mike Jones. Tom Slater, again, when you talk about all these things, you realise how risible it is. This is a state of how absolutely risible, what a joke our British political discourse is in terms of what MPs are demanding. Even when it comes down to, again, we have horrible crimes that are committed, or kids who commit suicide, awful things. I mean, everyone going on about that adolescence documentary or drama on Netflix as if it were a documentary, which it's not. And the answer is always more control, cutting down on freedom on social media, us being forced to identify ourselves, to do anything, whether it's, you know, whether you're an adult or a child. And the slippery slope of this is ridiculous, but never anything to actually deal with the actual problem that people deal with and enforcing the actual laws we've already got.
No, and that's one of the things, amongst many things, that winds people up about this issue or any other issue, is the fact that because the politicians have failed, because there are some people who are committing this crime, because there is this general issue in society around the edges, then everyone has to give up their freedoms, everyone has to give up their privacy. I think they're recognising that really doesn't wash. And the only reason politicians are flirting with these kinds of solutions is, first of all, because they just quite like them. They like people to shut up, they like people to be more surveilled, they like people to be more compliant, but also because it covers up for their own fundamental failures. They haven't been able to get a grip on this issue. You've had a situation, we've had successive governments now who at least rhetorically have said stopping the boats is a priority. Labour and Tories, neither have shown any
record
chance
levels again
of this actually happening. So people are well within their rights to wonder what is actually driving this, and I think it's often less about actually the issue at hand more than it is about covering up for their own failures and, you know, salami slicing our civil liberties at the same time, which is what they always like to do.
Exactly. Well, we can't be trusted. We do silly things like vote for stuff they don't agree with. I mean, what are you thinking, Tom, letting people have freedom? 11:47 is at the time. Up next, going to get to your calls coming in thick and fast on migration, on ID cards and all the big topics of the day. Get in touch at 0344 499 1000. We'll get to the calls up next. This is Talk.
Just a few weeks after the transplant, the uterus was healthy enough that the patient actually had a period, and she conceived on her first cycle of IVF when the embryo was implanted. So you can't have natural conception after uterine transplantation. When pregnancies occur, they occur after IVF.
Okay.
And you can see there with that magnificent picture of the team from all around celebrating the joy that their work is finally complete with the baby that came into the world 6 weeks ago.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:50 is the time. Lots of your messages and calls coming in about, in particular, this absurd, pathetic, it's been called road barrier. It's in the Sun newspaper today, built by the French. There are two of them, cost probably tens of thousands. It's paid for out of both of them, out of the £476 million a year you and me are forced to give to the French, because it's always £2 billion in the last 4 years to not stop the boats. But also the idea that MPs are calling for, what a surprise, more digital ID cards to try and stop illegal migrants working here in this country, though we can already stop them by doing that by simply massive fines, possibly even imprisonment for people who employ them illegally. I don't see why we don't just enforce the laws we already got, why we need more laws. But I'm asking what you think about all this. Michael says we should use the Navy to turn small boats around, send them back is what we should do. Darren says yes, we should stop giving France the money, we should get back what we've given them already. Tony says the barrier was probably signed off with British approval. This certainly is not going to be a deterrent. France isn't the issue, says James. They have the same problem as us. The government could stop this tomorrow if they wanted, but they won't because their donors won't let them. You've got to remember, big business love cheap labour. Or they're quite keen on illegal labour. And we know the use of Mexican migrants are off the scale in terms of producing goods. And everyone goes, well, if we don't have those migrants, we'll have to pay higher prices. Yep. I'm happy to do that. I really am. Miranda says the French are laughing at us. Just look at this barrier. Absolute joke. And Chris says we should stop paying France, then make them pay for every migrant that gets over here illegally. Quite tempting, but I'm not sure we get the money off them, but they are certainly taking le mick. Let's talk to Robert, who's in Hertfordshire. He's on the line. Good morning to you, Robert.
Good morning. I think what we've got is two tiers, excuse the pun, but you've got two problems here. You've got a problem with the migrants coming over, which is easier to solve, and then you've got the ones that are already over it, and until you get a change of government and get rid of all the radical lawyers and judges, you see, it's big business. Don't tell me. I'm a proper Cockney, so I'm very sceptical. Someone's earning a fortune. Don't tell me that French authorities are not getting a bung, because they are. You know, I'm one of these people. There's always got to be an angle in it, and they wouldn't be able to operate unless there was someone crooked.
Yeah, there are an awful lot of people making a lot of money, and it's not just the people smugglers. And we know, there's a whole supposedly human rights industry, refugee industry, where people are being paid. Often they're getting, they're not just like charity donations. They're getting state money to deal with this, and the human rights lawyers and the like. There's a lot of money, but I don't doubt at all there are bungs being paid and bribes being paid.
Yeah, but the thing is as well, people. You know, there's one word behind all of this, all of our problems, and it's woke. Now, lately, woke has had its teeth pulled out. It's not as powerful, woke, the word woke, as it was. You call people right-wing now, and they don't care. You know what I mean? They don't care now, because it's wearing off. And I'll tell you, listen, I'm not condoning riots, and I'm not condoning violence. But the only reason you can't, and obviously you can't answer, but the only reason there's not been riots on the street is because of the weather. I'm telling you now.
It's not been warm enough. You wait to the summer. I mean, exactly. I don't want us to get like that. I want our politicians to respond to the stuff we care about. Robert, thank you very, very much indeed. I appreciate that call. We basically got to get rid of the lefty lawyers and judges. Again, I don't even think leaving the ECHR is going to work, because we've got too many activist judges now. Let's go to Mark. He's on the line and he's in Carlisle. Good morning to you, Mark.
It's a slippery slope. It's an entry point to make sure that we all get ideas eventually. And I know secretly that they're planning a colour-coded system, which is not as you run a make on it. It's on the front of the card. There's going to be blue for posh, red for working class, white for honestly.
No.
I'm from.
Well, how do you work that out? How do you know what people are?
I know.
I'm common as muck. Some people think I'm posh.
Ask the government if they are planning it. They're planning a categorisation. I'm originally from a council estate. Mine's probably poo brown or something. Anyways, no, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put all my money into coots and basically start identifying as a pregnant giraffe and see what that categorisation is.
Well, I don't think coots will have you if you might have the inappropriate views. You know, see what they did with Nigel Farage.
Well, identifying as a pregnant giraffe, it will stop my producers telling me to wind my neck in because I'll start thinking that's offensive.
Good setup, good delivery. We're liking that, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Slater, there's no doubt at all. Look, people are cross. And it is risible. And again, it is, all these things are risible. And it is frustrating that we have government after government after government that promise us one thing and don't deliver. And then they come up with another new ploy, another new this and that. And then we're paying, state subsidies to I mean, again, I am in favour of legal aid and things, but not like the fifth appeal if you're somebody who's come to this country illegally and you've not been granted leave to stay. But it's the hand-wringing I think people have just had enough with, this abject inability and lack of willingness to actually deal with any of these issues. We know that we can deal with anything if there is a will. The Tories talked a good game and then didn't do it. Labour don't really talk a good game. I mean, they're trying to get a bit tougher because obviously seen the polling that says, even most, certainly the last few working class Labour voters they've got, they've had enough of it. And all your little woke liberal mates at your dinner parties are completely living in cloud cuckoo land if they think they can get away with this carrying on. But I just still don't think that any of the major parties are capable and willing to deal with this issue. No,
and also the public don't trust that they're even capable of dealing with the issue. I mean, it has been interesting watching the Labour Party, if you're going to put it in kind of crude terms, sort of tack right recently, or just tack towards the sort of common sense position on a lot of these particular issues, whether it's on migration, whether it's on foreign aid, whether it's on any of these particular problems. And, Keir Starmer will get up and give a speech and talk about, the open borders experiment or globalisation is over. And this might sort of tickle the fancy of newspaper leader columnists. But at the same time, the public aren't registering it. They're not thinking, oh, that's clever. He's tacking towards the issues that matter. People have switched off. They really don't like this government. They really don't like the last government.
20% in the polls. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people are flocking to reform, but that's not, they're still not quite at the point where they could really kind of spoil for a genuine upset at the next election. So things are in a mood of real despondency.
But people also don't believe a word that they're told, and quite
dangerous.
rightly. If I see one more headline saying Keir Starmer has vowed to, well, good luck with that. No one's going to believe any party at all of any political hue what they say they're going to do until they actually do it. No one's going to believe it because the proof is going to be in the pudding. We've been lied to and lied to and lied to since since 2010 onwards. People have voted for lower legal migration and again and again, and we've had higher and higher and higher. I mean, it is laughable. Whenever I write about this, we just think back to getting immigration back in the tens of thousands. What David Cameron pledged to do, again, it was a back of the envelope comment remark. In fact, another minister made it, but he pledged it election after election, tens of thousands, under 100,000, and that's net migration. We had almost 1 million a couple of years ago. That's going to be cut down. But again, the idea that because you're a student coming from Nigeria, you should be allowed to bring your extended family, not just your kids. I'm talking like 10 people with you, and then you put a stop to that, and then those numbers come down. Oh, what a surprise, but those students don't come. Well, I'll live with that. I'm sure we'll find some more. Hey, here's an idea. They're studying something useful that we want them to stay. How about, they're doctors, are they? Great. Well, we've got about 3,000 British students with straight AA levels who could love and would love to study to do medicine, but they can't get in because we limit the number of places. Why don't we train some of them up so we don't need to import people? The lack of joined up thinking, the lack of interest in the needs of the British people, that's not even, and economically that's even ignoring the cultural impact that we've seen in recent years. And I'm someone, I couldn't care less what the colour of your skin is. It's totally irrelevant to me. I think it's the least interesting thing about anybody. I don't care about your sexuality. It's irrelevant. I don't care about what you do, what you say. But when you bring in people from cultures that are vastly different and you don't have a dominant culture where you say, well, we'd like you to sign up to this, we'll respect you and your choices, But fundamentally, you've got to agree with our laws and our values and how we treat, you know, women, gay people and people of different religions or races. If you're not signing up to that, I don't want you here. I want you gone. It's that simple. But apparently that's a far-right view. I think it's the opposite of a far-right view.
No, especially if you actually believe in those platitudes that you often hear people mouth about wanting to live in a kind of harmonious, diverse society, or whatever. If you
Diversity
want
is our strength.
you need a kind of umbrella. You need a place in which people from different backgrounds and extractions can come together and share spaces.
And if you don't want to
and
sign
things
up
in
to
common.
British values,
without that, it becomes
well,
really
then don't come here.
It just becomes silos, and
absolutely.
Because they live in those silos already, they don't really.
And it's already happened, and we're stuck with that now. Again, unless some serious action is taken. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Up next, going to talk to Baroness Claire Fox about lots of big topics. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. Really appreciate you joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. Always great to have your company. Great to have the company still of Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. We're not letting him out of the studio until 1 o'clock. He's stuck here. We just locked the door. Lots more to talk about, including more than 40 Labour MPs, a lot of them from the Red Wall area. They've called for the introduction of digital ID cards to tackle illegal migration. Of course they have. Also, retail billionaire Sir Philip Green has just lost his battle in the European Court of Human Rights to limit free speech in the British Parliament. He wanted to try to prevent MPs and peers from being able to name people whose identities are covered by those controversial gagging orders. This came after he was named in Parliament back in 2018 by Labour peer Lord Hayne as the businessman at the centre of Me Too allegations, which were all over the papers, but we weren't allowed to know the name. Well, he's just lost his appeal. We're going to talk about that with our next guest in just a couple of moments. Plus, we're going to talk about the baby girl who has become the very first child in Britain to be born from a womb transplant. It's the first time the procedure has taken place in the UK. It's happened in other countries, but it's the birth of a little baby Amy to her mum after her own sister donated her womb so she could carry a baby herself. We're going to talk about that, the significance of that. Plus, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, very rarely away from the news. He's come under pressure to address the open use of crack cocaine on the London Underground after images of a man taking the drug in a carriage in front of a passengers went viral. I mean, I have to say, I've seen a lot worse than that in the tube carriages, but he's also facing a lot of pressure from the leaders of local councils across London who've joined together in a joint letter to say they'd like to share some of the mayor's powers. He's got huge powers over what happens in the capital city, and they'd like some of them, please, largely because we think they're from all different parties. They're not very happy with how Sadiq Khan is using those powers. Anyway, all of that coming up. I'd love to get to more of your calls as well. Do keep your calls coming in. In particular, we're talking about both French officials spending British taxpayers' cash on these pathetic road barriers, 2 of them, to stop small boat migrant crossings. The idea is to stop people, smugglers, taking their boats in, taking in, all the life jackets and everything to the beaches. 2 barriers, literally like the entrance to a car park. That's all it is. It's just a barrier that goes up or down. It is not, there are 2 of them. It cost tens of thousands of pounds. We paid for it from our taxpayers' money, the money that we give every year to the French. I kid you not, it's open during daylight hours but only closed at night. I wonder if the people smugglers can work that out. And even when it's closed, they can simply drive round because it's on basically a piece of land. It's completely flat. It's got green fields next to it. No hedge, no fence, nothing. Absolute joke. I want to know, should we stop giving France £476 million a year of our taxpayers' money to stop the boats, given that they are quite clearly not stopping the boats? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Free on X, of course, and free on our YouTube page too. Right now, let's turn our attention to my next guest. Independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas, Baroness Claire Fox joins us. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Hey, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. So much to talk to you about. Let's start, though, with this call for digital ID. Tony Blair, I mean, he's never found any problem he doesn't think could be solved with digital ID. I mean, he steps in chewing gum on the pavement. It's like, if we had digital ID cards, that would have solved that problem. This time, it's a bunch of Labour MPs, red wall MPs, blue Labour MPs, the ones who are very worried they're going to lose their seats in the next election, judging by the current polls, who know that immigration is a key issue. And they're saying, look, if we had digital IDs, if everyone had digital IDs like people have in Europe and other countries around the world, then we could stop illegal migrants working in this country illegally in the black market, and that would stop them coming to this country. What do you make of that plan?
So, I mean, you've covered this story so well in the programme, so a couple of additional points to make. I think it's interesting that there are red wall Labour MPs and blue Labour MPs, so we should note that there's a certain panic in the Labour Party, that there's a recognition that voters in general maybe reluctantly voted for Labour the last time, but it's by no means that they've got support from millions of working class people. Yeah. Second thing is, they know that immigration is one of the big issues that they have to address. And of course, it's nothing other than cynical that when they say we've got to do something to tackle the problem of both illegal migration and people working in the black market, we should introduce digital ID. Now, you've rehearsed very well already what's problematic about it. People worry about the social credit system from China. You know, will this lead to all sorts of ways that we are surveyed, surveillance will be brought in and so on and so forth, even control our behaviour. But I think apart from anything, the main thing is that I don't think we need it. Yeah, it's just quite simple. We do need to do something about tackling illegal migration. This is not the issue. This is not the way to do it. So it's irritating that they suggest bringing in a sort of very dramatic change
and very expensive
in free society, and it won't actually tackle the real problem. And if you wanted to do that, if they wanted to really get to the heart of it, these blue Labour, red wall MPs would be calling for a major overhaul of judicial activism. Yeah. Because one of the big pull factors has to be that you know that if you go through all that as an individual, because I'm not criticising them, who fight all their way to get to the UK, that honestly, at this stage, you can do anything while you're here. It's not a question of will they find out that you're working illegally. You can actually be, I don't know, a rapist, a paedophile, a shoplifter, or whatever, and you won't get deported because some human rights legislative activist, a lawyer, will step in and say, no, you can't deport them.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen it again and again and again. And those stats show that people coming from certain countries who are more likely to be those who've arrived illegally in this country on the boats because they're not going to get in any other way, have a much higher propensity to commit crime and get convicted of crimes than does the population who are already here, and indeed migrants from other countries who've come illegal routes. I mean, that is the reality. And everyone can shout, oh, far right and xenophobe and racist at people pointing that out. But the facts aren't racist, they're not far right, they're just facts.
But even if you're a law-abiding, as it were, illegal...
Yes. You're not committing other crimes after arriving here illegally.
What I'm saying is, if you have no intention of being a villain or doing some terrible, heinous crime, you must think, well, if I go to the UK, even the worst scum of the earth who are convicted don't get deported.
Yep.
So if I just go over there and kind of sit in the hotel and kind of behave, right?
I'll be all right.
I'll be all right.
And they're quite right.
To think that.
They're quite right.
Exactly.
And that is the trouble. And again, it's our activist judges. Here's the thing, though. This is going to come as a surprise to you. It would appear that the activist judges at the European Court of Human Rights, who do not have a strong record, in my view, have actually made a good decision for once. This is a case involving Sir Philip Green. He's, the businessman, and he was basically exposed by the Labour peer Peter Hain when he, in 2018, named Sir Philip Green as the businessman who was at the centre of Me Too allegations. Now, a lot of allegations about sexual harassment of staff, very unpleasant allegations. They were front page of the papers, but there was this gagging order, which basically a super injunction that prevented him from being named. Now, Lord Hain, as a peer and an MP, would have been entitled to do this, basically used privilege in Parliament of basically being able to name him, wouldn't be able to do it outside Parliament, but to name him in Parliament so that he could be named, and then newspapers and the media could use that privileged protection in reporting that he had been named in Parliament by Lord Hain. Now, Philip Green has gone to court. He has lost his legal battle this morning to use European courts to limit free speech in Parliament. He wanted them to stop parliamentarians being able to do that, but judges in Strasbourg threw out his case, saying a decision in his favour would be incompatible with the autonomy of the UK Parliament. I mean, I don't know about you, I am flabbergasted, but how come so much of the time the European Court of Human Rights doesn't seem to recognise the autonomy of MPs in the British Parliament to make laws that are supported as democratically elected and accountable members of Parliament, but in this for once they're backing our Parliament's autonomy.
I know. Well, it's I don't want to overdo it on saying well done to the European Court of Human Rights. But I mean, again, a couple of other things to note here. Of course, I'm a great defender of parliamentary privilege. It's very important, and I get it, so I would defend it. But if anything, I think that what we need to do is to see that free speech shouldn't be confined to parliamentary privilege. I mean, one of the things I'm worried about is that you actually have the right to speak freely in Parliament, allegedly. But the problem is that if you're not in Parliament, if you're a member, if you're one of the people who voted, not for the Lords and Ladies, of course, because we're unelected, but if you voted for MPs, you don't have such a privilege. Yeah. And, one of your other stories is obviously people who are locked up for saying the wrong thing. So I get very anxious about over-stressing the importance of parliamentary privilege, even though it's important, because actually I would like to see such respect for free speech expanded to the voters.
Yeah, and it was really important. There was this whole thing that I remember at the time, we were on air here, I remember talking about it repeatedly, that, you've got these very, very rich, nearly always men, very rich men who basically have been accused of wrongdoing, and they basically get these super injunctions. So it's not even like we're allowed to say that that we can't tell you what the crime is that they're being alleged to have done, or the case. You're not even allowed to report their name, not any link with them. And I've seen some of these documents, and I know some of the names. Some of those names have still not come out. Famous actors and others. And it is an outrage that we can't discuss this openly. That said, I know you and I feel very strongly about people being innocent until proven guilty. We've got some very famous men who've been arrested and some charged with some very serious crimes just in the last week, and people treating them as if they are guilty without waiting for a court case. So it's very important to get a balance between the two.
Of course. It's very important that people think how they use that speech that they have that's free. I agree. But just as an aside, I also think that there's increasing use of non-disclosure agreements by employers, all sorts of employers. And this is really problematic. I mean, I've been following cases where, universities, for example, get academics to sign NDAs. And then, for example, if they're a victim of some kind of a trans activist witch hunt, they're not supposed to then talk about what's happened to them in terms of bullying. There's all employment tribunals are now making people sign non-disclosure agreements. Lots of things being done in secret. And I think that whilst it's hugely important that people are innocent until proven guilty, it's also the case that so much is now happening behind closed doors that it creates an atmosphere, I think a conspiratorial atmosphere, where people then start saying, well, why is it that they won't let us know about that?
Well, you lead on...
You
lead on very well to another story I want to raise with you, and that is the post-Southport attack, the huge number of arrests and charges and prison sentences that were handed out to people, some for absolutely horrific crimes of violence and threats, absolutely banged to rights. But again, we'd have the absurd scenario of people being imprisoned simply for posts on Facebook and on X, Twitter, and then a few months later, people being let out of jail early who'd committed actual physical crimes, even sexual assault and rape, being let out of jail so we could keep those people behind bars, which seemed absurd, I think, to most sane people. Talk about the case of Lucy Connolly. She is the 42-year-old mum. She was a childminder. She's got 2 kids. She's also a carer for her sick husband. He's a Tory councillor. She came to prominence and notoriety for a very nasty, vile, and I would say racist message that she put on social media. It was up for only 4 hours before she realised it was, she shouldn't have written it, basically saying, doing mass deportations now, burn all the asylum hotels down with the people in it. I don't care. If that makes me racist, so be it, she said. But it was in the wake of the Southport attack, and it was when, of course, that disinformation was all over the internet, where we were, a rumour went round that it was an asylum seeker who was responsible for that attack on those young girls, leading to 3 deaths and a dozen or more serious injuries of young girls. This woman had a post-traumatic stress disorder from her own child dying a few years earlier. She's a carer, she's a childminder. She had references from numerous people whose children she cared for who were themselves immigrants, Nigerians and others, who wrote references about what a wonderful woman she was and certainly didn't feel she was racist. She had herself admitted that the post was carried out in haste and was wrong, and she deleted herself within hours, way before the police turned up a few days later. She's still behind bars, serving a 2.5-year sentence. Now, Alison Pearson of The Telegraph did a fantastic piece on her at the weekend, speaking to her husband and talking to about what she's going through in prison. She's repeatedly been refused the chance to get home, curfew home, and get early release to be with her family, with a tag, doing her full sentence, but doing some of it back at home. Lots of people have got involved in this. Elon Musk has now got involved. He has criticised prison chiefs for denying her the right to go home, when women who've committed multiple crimes, some violent, do get the right to go home. What do you make of this case? Is she, as many are claiming, a victim of not just two-tier justice, but is she now, on all intents and purposes, a political prisoner?
Well, I think that it's absolutely right that we make it very clear that people should not be locked up for speech crimes, and that also, whether she's a racist or not is irrelevant, because I don't think you should be locked up for thought crimes either. But it looks like, as you've explained and has been well documented now by Alison Pearson and more, that Elon Musk is right, that this is a great injustice, her being kept in prison. But context is all, isn't it? I mean, the context is that there is a prison crisis, overcrowding coming out the seams, and the Ministry of Justice has made some quite extraordinary decisions about early release schemes, where people literally, given a week, are just released for some very serious crimes to free up prison places. How ludicrous, then, that we have a situation where somebody who is obviously not a threat to the community is being kept in prison. And I just wanted to read the release on temporary license scheme. This is what HMP Drake in Staffordshire, where she's being held, where Lucy's being held, said. This is a discretionary scheme. Each case is rigorously scrutinised by the office into the prisoner's conduct and any impact on the victim and the community, and is assessed based on public safety. Now, you just know, without anyone telling you, that if they rigorously scrutinise this particular case, she'd have been out last week, never mind being kept in.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely resent, and this is where the two-tier thing comes in, that they are letting people out very quickly on an early release scheme, and they are inappropriately holding people in prison punitively, and then using this absolute garbage of an explanation as to why.
Yeah.
That is what makes people lose faith in the criminal justice system. And when you were saying earlier, very importantly, it's important that we have innocence until proven guilty and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
When you've got these kind of absolutely irrational, unfathomable decisions going on, people lose respect for the conventions of criminal justice and start naming names even when they shouldn't, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my problem.
It is soul destroying, isn't it? Because, and it's really, really important that we do have faith in the law. And we've seen, the two-tier policing. We've post Southport, we've seen two-tier policing. Of people said in terms of freedom of speech, even on social media, even the people who say that words matter, they seem to be remarkably unbothered by people on the left who were tweeting out some outrageous quote disinformation, blatant lies. No, apparently that's not a problem. I don't think our nation, as it is now, such as survives us not having trust, or vast swathes of us not having trust in the police and judicial system. Because I know people who've got cases coming up, some sort of quite well-known people with whom I'm friends, who've got cases coming up in the courts, and I think a few years ago I would have said, look, certainly, get a jury, don't we? You'll be fine. And we've seen, certainly in the wake of the Southport case, even people who have had more serious charges, they have been dismissed by the jury within minutes, because they just I'm sorry, we're not convicting someone of this. But I now have no faith in judges that they will make the right decision. And a couple of years ago, I was on a jury. I was so impressed with the system. I was so impressed at how much everyone on the jury cared. Everyone was taking notes. Everyone was, people really, really paid attention in court. I can't talk about what happened in the jury room, but people really cared about what was taking place and getting to the right decision. And I believe we did make the right decision. But now I kind of got no faith in the justice system anymore. And that's terrifying.
Yeah, no, the consequences of the two-tier criminal justice system, whether it's in sentencing, whether it's in who is released, what decisions are made about parole, who is deported and so on, is eating away at something very fundamental. Yeah. And when we talk about a free society and a democracy, something that we've all been, and we actually say, you should sign up to British values if you want to live here and so on. We have to therefore protect those values, right? Free speech is one of them, but so is the justice system. And, people will not like me saying this, but one of the reasons why I had very little sympathy for the likes of Tommy Robinson was because he flaunted, and just completely ignored a situation where he was told he shouldn't say something because of the legal system, right?
Yeah.
And he just ignored that and kept naming somebody completely unfairly.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that is because I can't then criticise even that way of behaving irresponsibly if, in fact, the system itself behaves in such a way as it treats people differentially. We have to think that justice is blind, that you will be treated equally under the law, and that they aren't going to use the legal system to make political decisions, which is what it feels like at the moment. And that's what it felt like after the Southport riots, because, let's be honest, the call from politicians led to a situation where the DPP and the Director of Public Prosecutions made it clear that people who were arrested should be made examples of. And we were told, be careful of what you write, be careful of what you tweet, and all the rest of it, with this sort of passive-aggressive threat. And I think that has really caused a huge amount of damage to our belief in British justice. And once that goes, then I'm afraid people will stop believing in a fair police force. And I mean, the fact that that the police can turn up and knock on your door if you're in a WhatsApp group and criticise your kids' school's decision-making, and that you can be arrested in front of your kids and held in a cell, and then be told that you're to stop making a fuss about it afterwards and to stop going on and complaining about it. That also means that even basic policing is no longer trusted, because we know that.
And there never seems to be any punishment for the police officers or indeed their chiefs who tell them to do this for doing that as well. Claire Fox could talk to you forever. I'm sure our audience would love us to. Baroness Fox, Independent Peer Director of the Academy of Ideas, thank you so much for joining us. 12:24 is the time. Tom Slater, there's so much to come back on there, but whatever you want to come back on.
No, I think Claire's fundamental point there about the trust, which has just evaporated, not just in the kind of post-Southport period, but before, where people really don't think going into the criminal justice system that they're going to get a fair shake. There's also a kind of sense in which the priorities are all over the place. Like we've had really summed up by that spectacle of clearing out prisons of actual burglars and thieves and violent criminals and so on, to make room for people who said things they shouldn't have on the internet. It's one of those things where you can, as soon as you lose the trust in the justice system, doesn't matter if on the case in particular there might be something that's not fully being explained or what have you, it's really hard to get back. That just becomes corrosive to the whole sort of enterprise.
I really worry. Again, having a justice system you can trust is such a fundamental part of living in a civilised society. That trust we have with the police, with courts and the like. Just got some breaking news through from Leicester Crown Court that a 15-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, they were a year younger each at the time of the attack last September, they have been convicted of the manslaughter of an 80-year-old man, Bim Coley. He was fatally attacked as he walked his dog in a park in Leicestershire September last year. He died a day after the attack from a neck injury. He was repeatedly attacked and beaten by the boy as the girl encouraged the violence and filmed it on her phone while laughing. We are in a terrible state of affairs, where you've got young teenagers, a 12 and a 14-year-old at the time, that they would, a bunch of them, they'd see this man and then I'm just going to go and attack this guy, racially abusing him, attacking him, beating him, it ended up being effectively to death. Out of the blue. This is very, very, very scary. Just to point out, the man had been charged originally with murder. He was acquitted of the more serious charge on Tuesday. They can't be named because of their ages. But I have to say, if you just start racially abusing and beating an 80-year-old man, I don't understand why that's not murder. But I wasn't in court. I didn't hear everything there. But just extraordinary. And again, the feral youths that we now have in our society is a really big worry. But the authorities seem to spend a lot more time worrying about someone writing something on social media rather than the crimes that we are all actually genuinely scared of. Because the idea that your elderly parents or you couldn't just walk through a park without some random, absolutely terrifying teenager who's totally lost, got no self-control and is violent, can just attack them or attack you, and you may never get out of that park alive. It is mind-blowing, and that wasn't something, when I was growing up, that wasn't something you would even consider would happen. These cases seem far more common than they used to be. Your reaction to that, give us a call. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. 12:27 is the time. This is Talk.
maybe if Labour MPs focused more on the situation in their constituencies and indeed the cities that they represent, it might be better for their constituents rather than focusing on issues in Pakistan or indeed the Middle East. I think the situation in Birmingham is absolutely appalling. If you were living in Labour-controlled Birmingham and seeing rubbish pile up, and there's one street which is on one side controlled by Labour, on the other side Bromsgrove controlled by Conservatives, and the difference couldn't be more stark. You've got rubbish under Labour and clean streets under the Conservatives.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just going to get a few of your messages coming in still about the French officials spending our taxpayers' money out of that almost $500 million a year we give them every year to stop the illegal migrants getting on those boats. They spent the cash on road barriers regarded as pathetic to stop small boat migrant crossings. They're open all day. You can easily drive around them. I mean, they are genuinely laughable. As I said, they've been taking le mick. You've been getting in touch. Dean says the fact that this is still a problem is pathetic. Both the French and British governments are enemies of the British people. The French are happy to pass along the problem to Britain, so they have no incentive to do anything about it beyond placating the superficial complaints and need only show marginal efforts to rationalise where the money you all pay them has gone. Blake says, yep, this is ridiculous. We should be telling the French enough is enough, sort it or we get our money back. Andre says it's actually, we'll probably end up spending them more money, won't we? Andre says it's actually scandalous. We're the laughingstock of the world, total and utter mugs we are. Bearing in mind, by the way, that the real mugs are the French people and the Germans and the Swedes and everyone who've got pretty much open border, well, Schengen area, open borders between their countries, allowing people to come in, unless you have a very large wall, Eastern Europe, with Turkey, right? You've got a very large wall all the way around the coast of France and Spain and Italy and Greece. I'm afraid there are going to be large numbers of people coming from poorer countries to come to this continent, and they're going to want to try and stay here, as we would probably want to do if we lived in basket case countries, whether it's civil war or dictatorship or just economically behind. The trouble is, this is the left-right thing, isn't it? Do we have a duty of care to the world to welcome them to our country? And I think the answer is a big fat no.
I think it's one of those things, isn't it, where what does helping look like? I mean, this idea that you
trading with them, get rid of the tariffs so their countries can trade with us and they can make money and have a job there.
No, absolutely. You know, rather than again kind of allowing these smuggling gangs to operate across their borders, which is the signalling side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I also just let you know what Rachel Reeves has had to say? She's been in Parliament today, and obviously there's a Chancellor. She was with the Prime Minister yesterday and talking in the West Midlands briefly, but she's answering questions from the MPs in the Commons. She's talked about the tariffs, saying the United States' decision to impose tariffs has had and will continue to have huge implications, she says, for the world economy. And she said the action we've seen in global markets, they're monitoring closely, but she said, talking directly to families and businesses, she said, we've got your back. And she said, we have been clear, nothing is off the table, we've got your back. You got a gun to our back. See, literally on Sunday they put the cost of employing people up by a massive whack with national insurance rises. In particular, the tariff, the actual amount that employers pay, and the point at which the threshold at which they start paying it. Minimum wage, although very good for the people on minimum wage, not so good for the companies that are employing the margins where they can hire the extra people. Although I'm genuinely in favour of the minimum wage, but it went up by a big whack this time round. I mean, that they haven't got our back. It's the opposite. These tariffs are going to damage our economy. They're going to damage the world economy. They're going to damage our economy. But crucially also, they're going to give the Chancellor a get-out clause for her abjectly awful economic policy. When it comes to the autumn budget, she's going to have an excuse to say, well, turns out we found another black hole. Yeah. Oh dear, it's worse than we thought. I'm going to have to raise taxes again.
But again, you do hope that at some point the changing circumstances geopolitically, well, it could go the way that you're saying. It becomes an excuse to just double down on a bunch of failed policies.
Yeah.
Or it could become, and I know you were talking this about Michael Sims early on, basically an excuse to do things which might upset the Labour faithful but would actually be quite good and popular in the rest of the country. Things like abandoning, not just tinkering with, but abandoning these net zero targets. Things like getting real about energy security and actually exploiting the natural resources that we do have in this country and that have gone unmined for a very long time. There's two ways this could pan out, one of which is, as you say, doubling down and blaming the scary orange man over there, or actually saying things really have changed, so we need to rethink some of these orthodoxies that we've been clinging to for a second. I'm not saying there's a large chance of that happening.
No, I don't think there's any chance of it happening. And again,
who knows?
They talk about dealing with inefficiency and waste and tackling tax evasion, all that. Again, every government does that, and they never do it. They just never do it. You know what? Sometimes we're doing this show. It's so soul destroying. No, it is though. I mean, I'm sorry. I hope it's not for you listening or watching. I apologise for that. But it just. And I always try and give praise when I think any government of any hue or foreign leader is doing anything that I think, good, well done, excellent. I've been praising Trump on a lot of the things he's done and, criticising when I think he's wrong. And when, they're talking about the planning reform and building my house, great, brilliant stuff. Some of the reforms to the NHS, absolutely, I like a bit of that. I try and give credit where it's due. I try not to make it partisan because I'm not. I want our country to be well run. I want people to be better off. I want people to be having freedom and choice and our country to be somewhere where our young people are going, this is where it's at. This is the future. I want people to have the sort of hope and the optimism and the confidence and the belief in our country and in their futures here that we should all have. And I just don't think any of us have it anymore. And we talk about, we don't trust our judicial system, we don't trust the people running the economy. Is that feeling that communities are against each other. That I don't feel we've got social cohesion anymore. Nothing works. The public sector doesn't work. We've got high taxes but rubbish public service. There's this whole feeling that sort of like it's all falling apart. And our politicians, whichever major party, are just sort of standing there going, oh, well, let's just do this little bit of tinkering here or this tinkering there, and they're not actually grasping it. And I'd almost like a Argentinian, Milei type thing. Right, here are all the problems. I think this country is crying out for a leader who just literally stood there and said, this is how bad things are. I'm going to lay out why these things are wrong. This is what we're going to do. And it's going to involve massively cutting back government, but doing the stuff that matters really well. And that may involve a massive investment in tax money. We're going to have tax to go up to a short period to put that investment in. We're going to sort out education. We're going to sort out healthcare. People are going to put, their shoulders to the grindstone, and we're going to get these waiting lists down. We're going to do this. But it involves like a sort of almost a warlike effort. But the answer always seems to be, digital ID cards or some stupid gate in France or some sort of control, you mentioned earlier, like some more controls on social media or things like that. There never seem to be anyone who wants to get to grips with the actual problems. No, and tinkering around the edges is exactly it, or doubling down on the things that have got us into this mess. I mean, they've had to rein back on it a little bit, but we still have a government which basically has a laser-like focus on growth, but that is really green growth, which is not a thing. This thing that Rachel Reeves and Ed Miliband made up after 3 or 4 glasses of Chablis. It doesn't exist. And yet they're still intent on pursuing it. So I really think that you can so see the opening for a credible. Doesn't even have to be a political party, but just an individual within one of the existing parties to say this is what we're going to do. Those days are over. This kind of holiday from history we used to exist upon, this when we could still kind of muck about pursuing terrible policies because of the fact that generally the times were okay. That's not over now anymore, and it's making people worse off and very angry. Absolutely, and I don't want people worse off or angry. Those are bad things to be happening. 12:39's time. We go overdue for a break. Must get to a break. Up next, we're going to be talking to the former president of the Royal College of Midwives about this miracle baby, the first little baby born here in the UK to a woman with a transplanted womb. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:41 is the time. Just putting down my cup as she came back up. Lots to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so. We go to the top of the hour. Ian Collins back in at 1 o'clock. Right now, let's talk about the little miracle. Front page pretty much every newspaper today. The very first baby born in the UK to a woman with a transplanted womb. Grace Davison's 36. She was born without a functioning uterus, but her sister Amy basically donated her womb to her a couple of years ago. It was the UK's only successful womb transplant. It has happened in other countries, and she has amazingly been able to give birth to her own child in February. They named the daughter, she and her husband Angus, Amy, after the sister who donated her womb. It's a wonderful UK first. But what's the significance of this? Let's talk about this with Carolyn Flint, who's the former president of the Royal College of Midwives. She's also author of Sensitive Midwifery. Good afternoon to you, Caroline.
Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. So how significant is this? This has happened in other countries. So the technology has been used before, but is this a major operation for the transplantation? And how significant it is that a baby can be born in a womb that doesn't belong to its own natural mother, but is in her body?
Well, it's a very complicated, enormous amount of stuff.
Oh, Caroline, I'm going to have to stop you. I don't know what's going on with the sound, whether you've got a microphone anywhere we can get you a slightly better sound, but it's quite difficult to hear you. We're hopefully going to get that sorted, because I don't want you to be struggling to hear what she has to say. But I mean, the mum said she was quite overwhelming because we'd never really let ourselves imagine what it would be like for her to be here. I have to say, I mean, I had to go through IVF. My daughter was born naturally, but I had to go through IVF, Tom, and lost a number of babies. And I always just want anybody who wants to have a child to be able to have a child. It's such a wonderful thing. But do you think this is a good use of, I mean, NHS resources to this, or is any sort of medical development like this a good thing because it could help people in the future?
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, there's always going to be that argument over resources, but anything that pushes in the right direction, which gets to a position where people can, you know, enjoy better fertility across the piece, and that's going to benefit people not just in this country who might be using the NHS, but all
everywhere
these discoveries feed in worldwide.
I think we've got Caroline Flint back. Caroline, apologies for that. I just wanted to make sure people can hear you. Just in terms of how big an operation this is.
Well, it's a very complicated operation because it involves muscles, veins, nerves, lymphatic system, everything. So you need very skilled surgeons. Of course, the operation has been done in other countries, but not very often. We're not talking about hundreds. We're talking about maybe a dozen or less women in the world.
No, it's not very wise. But I suppose my question is, I mean, again, I would never wish infertility on anybody who desperately wants a child. I certainly did and went through my battles. But and this sounds like a callous question. I'm delighted they've had their baby, and it's wonderful that her sister donated to her. In other cases, I know it's been someone who's died whose uterus has been transplanted. However, well, I suppose one could argue that, you know, if she could have her eggs and her husband's sperm, they could have an embryo, they could have it implanted in a surrogate. A lot of people might argue, is this a good use of any medical resources when there are plenty of other ways she could have had her own baby? She didn't necessarily need to have to carry it herself. Was this an operation that was worth the risk to her, possibly her baby, or indeed to her own sister to donate her uterus in this scenario?
Oh, yes, I would have said so. I mean, you're quite right. Pregnancy doesn't matter to some women. Pregnancy, you know, not every woman wants to be pregnant. A lot of women are desperate to be pregnant, to go through pregnancy, to go through labour, and to give birth to their baby.
Yeah, I find that strange. I mean, I had terrible pregnancies with the morning things, but certainly by 3 months I was fine. But I just wanted to have my own baby and have a happy, healthy baby. I kind of did, you know, everything else was secondary.
Well, you're quite right, and there are lots of women like you, Julia, but there are also lots of women who really want to be pregnant and who want to go through the whole experience. And it's terribly important to them.
And this is never going to be widespread, is it? Because I mean, there are women who are born with wombs uteruses that basically don't function. But this is never going to be something that's going to be on a widespread basis, is there? Is there this is useful medical knowledge that can be used in other cases?
It's incredibly important. It's nearly as important as the IVF breakthrough.
Really?
Have you seen the wonderful film Joy, starring Bill Nighy, all about the birth of Louise Brown, who was the first IVF baby? It makes you cry. It's magic.
Oh! I mean, God, I sat in an IVF clinic for a year. I know how important that is to people. I absolutely, wouldn't wish infertility on my worst enemy. I really wouldn't. I think every baby that's wanted. 3 cheers out. Oh my gosh, we need more babies. But I mean, in terms of where this technology takes us, this skill takes us, do you think we'll all benefit from this? Because these are skills, This is more knowledge, and it will benefit everybody in the end.
It will benefit everybody in the end, because it will not only help women who haven't got a uterus or whose uterus is there. It will do more in fallopian tube surgery, or they'll learn so much from it, and they'll get much better at it, and it'll get much cheaper, and it is magical.
And that will help more couples in the end. Okay, you persuaded me. You persuaded me. Former President of the Royal College of Midwives, Karen Flynn. I'm sorry our time was curtailed because of the problems with the sound, but I'm glad we got you on much better sound there. 12:47 is the time. Tom Slater, your thoughts on this? It is such a difficult area. I mean, it's bad enough. Well, most women can't even get NHS IVF, let alone anything else.
No, absolutely. And I'm in favour of more or less anything that actually helps people, have children if they want to, just because by sheer, silly biological lottery circumstances that's not been possible. There's always going to be that argument under our healthcare system where the resources are allocated, but surely in general we can see this as a positive
Absolutely. Thing. Congratulations. Any baby that's wanted, fabulous. I'm very, very happy for you. 12:48 is the time. Going to take a break. We're going to talk about something completely different. People taking crack cocaine on the tube in London. And why are so many council leaders around the London area calling on Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, to share out some of his powers? Don't they think he's doing a good job? That's up next. This is Talk.
Maybe if Labour MPs focused more on the situation in their constituencies and indeed the cities that they represent, it might be better for their constituents rather than focusing on issues in Pakistan or indeed the Middle East. I think the situation in Birmingham is absolutely appalling. If you were living in Labour-controlled Birmingham, you're seeing rubbish pile up. And there's one street, which is on one side controlled by Labour, on the other side, Bromsgrove controlled by Conservatives, and the difference couldn't be more stark. You've got rubbish under Labour and clean streets under the Conservatives.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:51 is the time. Let's talk about what people do on public transport. I have seen some absolutely horrific things. People very, very drunk, people making out, people smoking when they shouldn't be. I've seen people cutting their toenails. I kid you not, on public transport. The London Tube is renowned for such things. But I don't think I've seen quite yet someone actually using crack cocaine on the train. But a man appearing apparently, quote, as high as a kite, with apparently we're told a gormless grin expression, that's most of us on the train, was basically spotted taking crack cocaine in a carriage in front of passengers. It was filmed, it was seen, and now people are saying we really need to get to grips with what is going on public transport. Let's talk about this with Alex Wilson. He's a Reform UK London Assembly member and joins us right now. Very good afternoon to you, Alex.
Afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I want to say I've seen it all on the tube. I have to say, I mean, I'm always amazed that people don't even understand, like, moving down the carriage or letting people off the train before they get on. I've always been of the view, snipers is the answer for the tube. The sniffing, the loud music, the bad behaviour, everything. But, you know, crack cocaine openly in a brightly lit carriage in front of passengers, that kind of takes the biscuit, doesn't it?
Yeah, when I saw the reports of this, and I've seen the video, it's absolutely staggering to see that kind of behaviour can go on our public transport network, which we are all, of us in London, reliant on to get around, to get to work, do our daily business and so on. And you just don't need that kind of behaviour going on. I mean, you're right to point to a general kind of decline in standards of behaviour that we've seen on our tube network over recent years.
I think on all public transport, I think trains, buses, everywhere around the country, I think a huge number of people don't know how to behave in public anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, have a proliferation of graffiti, back on the rise again, littering, all sorts of...
In the morning. But I don't even think it's criminality a lot of the time. I think it's worse than that. I think it's just general normal behaviour. It's the people... Back me up, everybody, on this. It's the people who are FaceTiming loudly like this in a public place, feet on the seats. I say people throwing litter, leaving stuff. I say the cutting of the toenails, I've got to be honest with you, that was the one that was the limit for me. I'm literally, are you beep, 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 kidding me? I said, people are bizarre. But the fact that this man is on crack cocaine, he probably wasn't even aware of where he was he?
Yeah, perhaps. And... yeah, as far as I know, there's not yet a law against cutting toenails, even though it does sound like a very disgusting behaviour to be doing on the tube. But no, back to the serious point. Taking drugs on the tube, it's unacceptable. And the thing is, there are enforcement officers available on the network. We have a big debate about policing numbers in London, and that's a big issue for London as a whole. You've seen only last week Sadiq confirming that 1,700 officers and staff will be lost from the Met in the forthcoming year. But actually, it's not even just about that. There are staff, TfL enforcement staff, who are trained and have the powers to enforce these kind of rules and laws, and they are not doing so. And we need to ask why they're not doing so. They're being paid to do a job, and they're not doing it.
But that's not the staff who are like driving the trains or who are at the tube barriers and things. Because again, people see this, and it's the same as train stations. National train stations. People jumping barriers, people not bothering. No one does anything at all. It's just like absolutely right. But again, I so rarely see anybody who's carrying out enforcement enforcement, and nearly always, especially if they're in a uniform, well, brilliant. The people who are breaking the law don't do it when the guys in the uniform are around, so they don't catch anybody because people go, uh-oh, I've got to behave. But the moment they're gone, they're misbehaving again. I mean, that's the trouble.
They are still doing it in front of the people with uniform. You see that on everybody's daily commute, you'll see a large number of people fare dodging, barging straight through the barriers. Now, there are staff available and trained and paid to stop them. They're called Transport Support and Enforcement Operations Officers. I submitted a written question to the Mayor recently asking basically what powers do they have. He replied saying they have the power to enforce TfL bylaws, and they even have the power to use reasonable force to remove people from the network if they are causing these problems.
I want the power. I remonstrate with these people all the time because they're making my ticket more expensive, and that's the same for the national network as well. Just fine. I want to get to another story because it's absolutely fascinating. They're all 32 London borough leaders, and I'm sorry, by the way, for being a bit London-centric, but on this case, it is our capital city. So Labour, Tory, Lib Dem and Independent, 32 borough leaders across London. They have written a signed letter, joint letter, calling on Sadiq Khan to basically share out some of his powers. They want a radical shake-up of his dominance. They want to use the English devolution bill to strip him of his total control. Basically, let's be honest, because they don't think he's doing a very good job. Your very brief response to that, please.
Absolutely. Really interesting idea. I think it's plain to see on housing, on transport, on crime, Sadiq is failing, and anything that can kind of bring him back in check is got to be worth discussing. The Assembly, we have a London Assembly that's elected at the same time as the Mayor. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have that much in the way of power. The power is all very much concentrated in the hands of the Mayor. So whether the answer is to give more powers to the boroughs or whether it's to give the Assembly more teeth to deal with Sadiq and his failings, either of those would be well worth having that discussion, and hopefully we can be part of that.
I've always very much enjoyed your questioning of Sadiq Khan. That's always quite good fun to watch. Alex Wilson, he's a Reform UK London Assembly member. Thank you very much. Brief word from Tom Slater on that. We're both London dwellers.
No, absolutely. Things are really unravelling out there. I think there's no two ways about that. Just the low level, what we used to call antisocial behaviour as well. But it's, when you get to the point of smoking crack on the tube.
I'm telling you.
I admit I haven't tried.
I've said this for years. Snipers is the answer. Not to kill, just
a wound.
Just wound. I'm serious. If everyone knew if they behaved disgustingly in public, whether against the law or not, that snipers were a possibility. I'm just saying, people would behave differently.
All about solutions on this show.
I'm all about solutions on this show. Don't complain. I don't care. Tom says, thank you very much. Ian Collins is here. Bet you like snipers on public transport.
I wonder what you were going to say. But...
Have you ever clipped your toenails in a public place?
Oh, man, no.
I mean, I know.
Seriously.
It's not even something you do in front of your other half.
Yeah, but would you do makeup on a train?
I will touch up lippy.
Yeah.
Bit of powder. No, but it's when girls do the full...
No, it's the nail varnish.
No, but it's when... Yeah, nail varnish, yeah.
You might as well just whip out the white
but it's when
spirit.
they do the full-on everything. They're doing everything from scratch. And you're like, oh, my God, do you... Get up 5 minutes earlier.
Why don't you bring a bowl and have a shower as well?
I know, exactly. Do the armpits, shave them.
Do the whole thing, yeah. Do your bits and pieces.
No, but it's just bizarre.